Bydd y cadeirydd yn agor ein cyfarfod yn awr. The chair will now open our meeting.
Bore da, a croeso cynnes iawn I pawb. This is the May 22 meeting of the Velindre University NHS Trust Public Trust Board meeting. And I'm delighted that we're able to meet together now for what is the second time of us meeting in person since the onset of COVID. Although we do have a number of colleagues who are joining us virtually, as well as others of us who are based this morning in the Welsh Blood Centre. Apologies for being a little bit late in starting. We had some problems with setting up the technology at the outset. I'm pleased to confirm that this meeting is being live streamed today, so that those of you joining our meeting remotely will be able to access the meeting on the Trust website should you wish to. There's a mix of staff and public listening in today, and I just want to extend a very warm welcome to you as well. So I'd like to begin now with apologies, please. We have apologies from Martin Veal, Independent Member, Vicky Morris, Independent Member, Kath O'Brien, our Chief Operating Officer, and Sarah Morley, Executive Director of Organisational Development and Workforce. Are there any other apologies which I've not been made aware of? Thank you. I'd like to welcome also those in attendance today. Stephen Allen, I saw you earlier, Stephen, when I could see everybody. Who's the Chief Officer of the Community Health Council. Stephen, are you there?
I am, Chair.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
David Cogan, our Patient Liaison Representative. Morning, David. And
good morning, Chair.
And Katrina February, Audit Lead for Audit Wales.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, Katrina. And I'd like also to extend a warm welcome to Rachel Hennessy, Acting Director for the Velindre Cancer Service. Morning, Rachel. And to Alan Prosser in his first board meeting following his permanent appointment as Director of the Welsh Blood Service. Congratulations on that appointment and welcome to the meeting, Alan. And Rachel and Alan are deputising for Kath O'Brien. And I also want to welcome Susan Thomas, who's our Deputy Director of Organisational Development and Workforce, who's deputising for Sarah Morley. We'll be joined in the agenda later on by Anne-Marie Jones, our Business Support Manager, Sarah Evans, the Commercial Director of Compass, Gavin Bryce, our Associate Director of Programmes for Transforming Cancer Services, and Hugh Llewellyn, the Director of Commercial and Strategic Partnerships for Transforming Cancer Services, and Andrea Haig, who's our Director of Cancer Services. So I think I've welcomed everybody. It's a long list, but very, very pleased to welcome everybody to this meeting. The procedure for asking questions. I can't see. I can only see the people in this room, but you can see. Yeah. So our board secretary, who's sitting to my left, Lauren Fear, she will let me know if anybody has their hands up. So put your electronic hands up, please, or wave at the screen because our board secretary can see you. Okay, so 1.3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest which need to be declared, which are pertinent to the items on today's agenda? That's a no, I think. Thank you very much. So if I can now take you to 1.40 on the agenda, which is matters arising, and the action log. And the first item there, 4.1.0, refers to the annual audit report. And the board decided to ask Kate if she would revise the Audit Wales report to ensure it's clear that the report is written in the first person by the Auditor General, not just signed, but it's written by the Auditor General. So Kate, has that happened?
Sorry, Chair, I'm just trying to get my microphone
fine.
on.
Don't worry.
Our reports are written under the brand of Audit Wales, which covers both the Auditor General and the Wales Audit Office staff. So we sort of looked into this. We consider we don't need to change it for this year. However, we are looking at what our annual audit reports will look like in future years, and I think it'll probably be much clearer in the next iteration that you receive.
Okay, thanks, Kate. I think it was Gareth who raised this point at the last meeting. So Gareth, I'm just asking you, are you content with that response from Kate?
I think we are where we are, Chair.
Yeah.
So that let's hope that it's clearer in the next audit report, because it refers, this year's audit report referred to, I believe, and it is a statement by the Auditor General, so it would have been helpful to have his name on it. But let's hope that changes for next year.
Thank you, Gareth. So we'll note that. 7.20, which is the Cardiff Cancer Research Hub. The proposal for the tripartite partnership between Cardiff and Vale, UHB, Cardiff University and Velindre University NHS Trust. We've got the progress to date noted there. I would like, if I may, to add, so that action remains open until the autumn, until October. I'd like to add there that when drawing up the heads of terms, that colleagues consider the branding of Velindre in the nomenclature of the hub. We've mentioned this in several meetings, and Velindre name doesn't appear. It's called the Cardiff Cancer Research Hub, and I think it's important that the Velindre brand isn't diluted, and that we put our best efforts and minds to thinking of how we ensure that Velindre is included in the branding. So with your permission and approval, Carl, I'd like to add that to the action log.
Well, I don't think you're asking me for my approval, Chair.
Because you have to do the work.
Yeah, no. I mean, Jazz and I mean,
Okay.
just a point. We've discussed many things with our partners, but at the last meeting, we agreed the obvious principle that is strengthen those three brands, becoming a partnership. So that will strengthen our collective endeavours, but also attract a whole range of other potential partners. So that is agreed in principle, definitely now to contract that. So yeah, the agreement in principle, we'll enact that on behalf of the organisation.
Thank you. Take that through. Jazz, is that all right with you?
Absolutely agree with what Carl has said. I mean, I think, you know, this is important, not just for ourselves, but actually for the success of the research hub itself.
Yes, I think so.
And I think the principle has been agreed, but we will need to work through what that will mean in practice.
I just wanted to make sure we captured it somewhere so that we're going to do. I think it would be important for our patients as well. So thanks both for that. And then 2.1.1, the minutes from the Public Trust Board meeting held on the 27th of January, which is about the level of detail that's captured in the minutes. And as you can see in the progress to date, we are intending to work through this at our next board development session in June, after which we'll come back with an update and hopefully be able to close that agenda item off. The next two are closed. And then 2.2.3, Transforming Cancer Services Programme Scrutiny Subcommittee Highlight Report. A meeting to be arranged with the Community Health Council to discuss communication and engagement in relation to the programme. I think we've just about arranged a date to meet with yourself, Stephen.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah. So we hopefully have an update for the next meeting and be able to close that off. The next one that is open is 8.20, which is about the integrated medium-term plan, and that in future reporting, the request there for challenges to be in the appropriate colours will be included in the next report. So those are the matters arising. I've got one I just wanted to check. Have I written it down with yourself, Gareth? Not Gareth, sorry, with Steve, with the Community Health Council, which was that you said that you had collected some feedback from patients on digital appointments, and that you would provide feedback to us, Stephen. So I'm just wondering if that's, is there a process in place for that to happen?
My understanding is, Chair, that that has been forwarded to the Trust. I will check when I'm off the meeting and to make sure that's been sent over. But it was the All Wales report that we done on digital technology and tablets, it was called, where patients across Wales actually fed that in. So that was the name of the report. But we will, I will confirm that's been sent over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. That would be really helpful. So we now come to, anybody got any points to raise on the action log? Okay, so we come to section 2 on the agenda, which are the consent items. And we've got 2 items for approval, and the remaining items are for note. Just to remind colleagues, the consent part of the agenda considers routine committee business as a single agenda item, and members can ask for any item that's listed under consent to be moved to the main agenda if a fuller discussion is warranted. So could I ask now, does anybody want to move anything out of consent into the main agenda? Stephen, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not so much wanting to move something out of consent. I just wanted to highlight one point on the TCS committee highlight report. Would you like me to do that now? Or do you want to see what other questions come up first? So I say it was just briefly to
if I may, I'll take it when we come to the highlight reports, which is under consent. But I'll do the approvals and then I'll take the highlight reports.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Gareth?
Thank you, Chair. I also have one question in relation to item 2.1.2, which is the commitment of expenditure exceeding Chief Executive's limit. I'm happy to ask the question now. I don't necessarily expect the answer now or take it out of consent. Entirely up to you.
Well, I'll just check if anybody else has got matters to raise, and then we'll come back to that. So Matt, you've got something to raise?
Yes, Chair, it's on 2.1.2 as well. It's just a matter of accuracy on the summary paper. I need to correct something that's not correctly reflected there.
Okay, I can't, any other hands up? Laura? Okay, so if I can then come to the items for approval, and the first one, well, we've done the minutes, they're approved. The commitment of expenditure exceeding the Chief Executive's limit. Gareth, do you want to raise your point first, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the first 2, I think, and we have an assurance at the end of the paper that's submitted that the lead director assures us that procurement procedures have been complied with, and whether that should be one of the executive directors rather than assistant director, as is currently the case.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so really good point, Gareth. So I can give you my personal assurance today, but I can also then arrange for that to have my signature on, as you requested. That would help.
Thank you.
So that will happen for when it comes in. Yeah. Thank you. And then Matt, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So for the item relating to the compartmentalization, I said that correctly, it's showing as 255,548, but of course the heading is in thousands, so I don't want people to think that's millions. It is actually 265,000. So we'll take off the last 3 digits or put a decimal on it. Sorry, I want to correct that, please.
So that will be corrected, and when we receive the paper.
Yeah.
And then there's the annex to the laundry detergent. Nobody wants to comment on that. So those items for approval are approved. And then for noting, we've got the Remuneration Committee highlight report, 2.2.1. And then we've got 2.2.2 Transforming Cancer Services Programme Scrutiny Subcommittee highlight report. Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jez. I just really wanted just to draw to the board's attention just one item on the highlight report, which is the second item in advise, bottom of page 2, over to the top of page 3. It's in regard to the programme risks and issues registers, where the IMs have been expressing concern for several meetings now, they've perhaps not been kept up to date as well as they could be, with dates slipping and not necessarily updates on every relevant item being presented. So that was discussed in some detail at this particular meeting, and subsequently we have had meetings with Carl and others regarding this and with Steve, and that this will be addressed going forward. But I just thought it was an important item to draw to the board's attention, because IMs in other subcommittees may or may not be experiencing similar issues, and I just wanted to make sure that that was drawn to the board's attention. And Gareth and Hilary in particular have been very vocal in pursuing this particular point. So just, as I say, just make the board aware of that. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Stephen, for that. And then we've got the Transforming Cancer Services Communication and Engagement update, which is for noting. We've got the Welsh Health Specialised Services Committee Joint Committee meeting for noting. We have the Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report for noting, and the Policies Approved Report for noting. So that concludes the consent agenda. Is everybody content with that, or does anybody want to raise anything? This is your last chance to do that. I can't see any hands up, Lauren. Any hands up? No. Okay. So we now we don't have anything today under section 3. We have got a really big agenda today. So I move straight away to section 4, which is the chair's, which is my update report. And you can see from that from the report how busy it's been. I've set out in there all of the issues we've discussed in our board development sessions, so as a matter of transparency. And I'm willing to take any questions in relation to anything that we've discussed in board development sessions. My screen is now frozen, so I can't move anything. Apologies. Oh, it's starting to move again now. Sorry about that. We've had to have a number of extraordinary private board meetings, and 2 have been in relation to legal matters, and I can't remember what the third one was in relation to. What was the third one? And the third one was on competitive dialogue. So those were the extraordinary private board meetings that we've needed to have. The independent members group is now meeting regularly and discussing and looking at ways of improving governance, and we're discussing that with the chief exec and the board secretary, and there will be matters which will come forward, and we'll go into the board development session next month. International Nurses Day was a very busy day in this trust, with myself and the chief exec visiting the Cancer Centre and Welsh Blood Service, and we were you note there that the chief nursing officer for Wales, Sue Tranca, decided that she would open up a sort of an award to be awarded on International Nurses Day, and it was very heavily subscribed to, but she decided that only 3 awards would be given in Wales this year, and I'm very, very proud and pleased, as I know is our Deputy Director of Nursing, Allied Health Professions and Clinical Scientists, that one of those 3 individuals who were awarded the Chief Nursing Officers prize for International Nurses Day was one of our nurses in the trust. I'll think of Rachel's second name.
It's Rachel James.
Rachel James, and we all met with Rachel down in the cancer centre, and she was her citation was read out by the chief nurse. That was very satisfying, I have to say. And two of our nurses attended the Westminster Abbey Florence Nightingale service to represent the trust, and we were very pleased that we were represented there. See Rachel's name. The Football Association of Wales Special Recognition Award for the Welsh Blood Service. The Football Association of Wales has decided to give Welsh Blood Service a special recognition award in celebration of our Blood, Sweat and Cheers community partnership, which we've been developing over the last 18 months. I was very proud to be down at the football ground in Barry, and I can't remember the name of that football ground, to launch this initiative. So to see it progressing so well is very pleasing indeed. And your comms team, Alan, have worked very hard on this matter, and please pass on our thanks to the comms team, because that's increased the number of blood donations and hopefully will increase the number of bone marrow people who will join the registry. So that's a very important initiative for us. The Chief Executive and I visited the new Wellbeing Centre, which is being developed for our staff earlier this week, and we were really very pleased to see the effort and the thought and the diligence which had gone into altering the building that we released, and to make it a place where our staff can go visit. And I think there's open days this week, and then hopefully in the next week or so it will be open for staff. And it was we congratulated the staff who've been leading this initiative, and hopefully having that centre will be a great boost and a bonus to all of our staff who might want to use its facilities. And I think the only other thing I'd want to note is that I went with our new arts coordinator to visit a Bwthyn, which is the hospice based on the Royal Glamorgan Hospital site, to see exactly what they've done in terms of arts in health in that building. And it was an absolutely inspirational visit. So watch out, everybody, got lots of ideas which we're going to put into the pot. But as much as anything, we were very interested in the process that they went to engage with the public, the staff, with all stakeholders, and to arrive at the various features and processes in that hospice. So I was very pleased to note that. So that's my report, and I'll take any questions or observations. No, thank you. So can we move please to the Chief Executive's report? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. And morning, everybody. I won't go through everything that's in my report. Just to reiterate, Donna's covered a few visits that we've made over the last 3 months, 2 months since the last board meeting. And I think that reflects generally where we're moving towards in terms of a COVID response. I don't specifically mention COVID in my report, but I think just to highlight a couple of things from my point of view, we've had further guidance around social distancing and a few other things last week, which I know that Nick will pick up under the QSP update to let you know where we are with those things. But I think it's just really great to start to be able to get out there and actually meet with everybody in the trust again in the way that we were previously over 2.5 years ago. I think that's certainly something we enjoyed around International Nurses Day. There are other events coming on as well, and I think I also met with the CNS team, which is a really good meeting as well. So opportunities out there for us all, I think, to engage differently moving forward. I have changed the arrangements for gold around COVID. We now incorporate that as an update through the exec management board meetings that we hold. So again, stepping back a little bit from those arrangements that we have in place. Couple of things from the my note: joint escalation and intervention arrangements. You note we remain in routine measures. And I think a positive reflection for us all, everybody across the trust, given the circumstances we're operating in, to remain in that situation is no mean feat. And I would personally like to thank everybody for their contribution, both within the board and in the organisation, for keeping us there. It's everybody's efforts that make sure that we retain that status. There's something in there about the NHS exec. You will see in the minister's announcement. There's a bit more detail in the letter, but we'll keep you up to date as the steering group stroke board gets established and we know more about what the direction of travel is. Related to the joint escalations, we got our joint exec team meeting with Welsh Government officials on the 16th of June, and we'll keep you updated as to where we get to with that as well. I'd like to add my congratulations to Donna's for Alan's appointment, and as you see, Matt now has a deputy in place, which Chris is still early days in the organisation, but he is already proving really helpful in taking our finance agenda forward, and it will be obviously a key focus for the year. Apart from that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Steve? No, so thank you for that, Steve. We note your report. So we now come to item 6 on the agenda, strategic development, and we come to a really chunky part of the agenda now, very important part, which kind of brings together some very significant pieces of work, which is the trust enabling strategies, and these are for approval. And I'm sure Carl will introduce you to some of the process that's been gone through, but I just wanted to highlight that each of these enabling strategies have been to the Strategic Development Committee, and I'll invite Stephen, yourself as chair, and or Carl to comment on what we discussed in the Strategic Development Committee. And this is by way of assuring the board that there has already been a fair amount of scrutiny of these enabling strategies. So, Carl, can I hand over to you to lead this item, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I was a chance to have a look at the paper. What I'll do, Chair, if you're okay with it, I'll just put a couple of points in the cover paper.
Yeah.
Talk a tiny bit about the enabling strategy, then we'll open up for discussion. So I think the first point to note really is why, and in the first sort of couple of paragraphs there, why are we doing this? Just to remind everybody, essentially this is a strategic refresh up to about 2032, and what we're trying to achieve is 2 or 3 simple things really. First of all, to be able to describe a clear and compelling vision of the future for both the organisation and the services we provide. The second bit then, I guess, is really to develop this strong and really uncomplicated narrative for our patients, our donors, our staff and future partners about what good looks like. And the last bit really is to help us understand, allow us to develop, I guess, a roadmap and a set of plans to enable us to get there. So that's really what we're trying to do in the work that we've been undertaking for the past couple of years, which has been, as the paper says, sort of interrupted a bit by COVID. The second bit really I want to draw the committee's attention, the board's attention to, is where we are in the process. And I've just handed out 1 page of A4, which I recognise colleagues on the call haven't had, and I'll circulate that. So really just describes what the endpoint looks like. So we've already had the trust board approve the trust strategy 2032, that was approved in January, which re-established a new purpose and a new vision and our 5 goals. The next series of deliverables was what we're encountering today really was, we've got a 5-year plan for the cancer service, the blood service deliver its 5-year strategy by July, and then these enabling strategies. So before us today, we have digital, workforce, sustainability and estates, and the next protocol then is the important one, which is clinical and scientific. So it's just to share with the board that we are making good progress in all of these things, and then we'll have the ability to develop that into a roadmap. So the third bit, I think you've touched upon, Chair. I just wanted to pull up before we get into the documents, is Annex 1. And I just want to make a couple of comments on the overall engagement process. It's been about 2.5 years stop-start because of COVID. And we've essentially, I think, covered off about 500 or 600 people face-to-face in our organisation, which represents almost sort of 35 to 40% of our staff, which I think is really comprehensive. And also had lots of conversation with colleagues in the health CHCs. I see Stephen there, who's made a significant contribution on behalf of Cardiff CHC, but also others. And we've also then sort of supplemented that with the use of online surveys, and that has been actually really fruitful. We've actually got some really rich information back, which has had a direct impact on changing and evolving the plans in front of you today. And I'll just sort of mention in figure 1 there, you'll see some of the headline feedback we had on the strategies in front of you today. The last bit, and I'll just jump straight to the papers there, and just wanted to draw the board's attention to para 210. As you said, Chair, these have gone through quite a rigorous development process, and the committee, the strategy development committee, received them on a number of occasions in the formative stage around PowerPoints right the way through to the documents themselves. So just wanted to draw the board's attention to some of the discussion at the committee on the 16th of May. I won't go through that, but it's there for colleagues to see. So that's the process we've been through. In terms of the 4 papers in front of the board today, I think they've all got importance. I think just to draw a couple of principles to the board's attention, what we have been able to do is to first of all provide a house approach, a house style. So you'll try to see that we're trying to get a common currency and a single language across the organisation, which is uncomplicated, which everybody can understand, rather than lots of jargon and management speak. The second bit really is alignment. We've worked really hard to try and get alignment between the various plans. So, for example, where we are, one of the goals in our is around sustainability. So, and we also talk about agile working. So we've got a real run around. If we want 30% of our staff to be able to work from home and it suits the business, then we need digital capability. We also need training, digital literacy, and we need some investment. So we've mapped that in terms of enabling strategies. I would say it is never perfect. We've had a really good go at that, and it has borne fruit, but there's still more to do. So that's really where we are in terms of the process. Now, going through each of the documents, I won't go through them, just a couple of headlines. The sustainability strategy is really important because that essentially frames our organisational approach, and for me translates the intent set out in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act into a couple of things. First of all, how do we introduce a culture and different behaviours as an organisation? Secondly, systems and processes. Thirdly, conscious decision making, which is based around the Act. And fourthly, translate that into action. So how does that make a tangible difference for patients, donors, and the staff who work for us and with us? There's 10 themes, which I'm not going to go through. And I think the one thing I would draw our attention to really is our understanding of sustainability in this document is not simply about carbon neutral, carbon net zero. It really starts to take us toward then this broader understanding of social value and our wider contribution as an NHS organisation in terms of the foundational economy. How do we use our resources to make resilient communities, prosperity and wealth? And also, how do we use our assets to get people involved and have a far better use of the things they contribute to in terms of their taxes? So that's the sustainability report in a nutshell. The digital, we talk a lot about digital, and I think there's 6 themes in there which are really powerful, from essential infrastructure applications, so getting the basics in place, right the way through to culture. We talk a lot about digital first, but that actually means us investing time, effort and resource in supporting people to get the necessary skills, and as importantly, digital inclusion. So we also know that some of the, particularly the services we provide, are often used by the people with perhaps the least in society, those who are suffering from poverty, social exclusion. So using digital to try and change the balance. And finally then, security and cyber, so things you'll be familiar with. Quickly onto the estates document, again, fairly straightforward, all about a great experience of our estate, making it safe, making it carbon neutral, making it accessible so people can get to it on foot, on bike and using public transport, and then using that as a launch pad for this broader opportunity for people to use our estate and our facilities in their spare time, so on and so forth. I'm just going to pass across to Sue to say a couple of words on people, and then we'll open that up for conversation.
Okay, thanks, Carl. So the people strategy, along with the other strategies, really focuses on the importance of our workforce the priorities really to have a healthy and engaged, skilled and developed, planned and sustained workforce. There are 6 priorities in that strategy around well-being, supply and shape of the workforce, ensuring that we have education and training embedded, attraction and retention, again, alignment with the digital strategy, so having a digital ready workforce, and the importance of leadership and succession. Key priorities for us within that strategy are obviously ensuring our well-being of the workforce is key, and we've been doing lots of work around that. Having the right people in the right place, the right time is another priority, and promoting Velindre as an employer of choice is key priorities within that strategy. Again, just coming back to the point of engagement, we haven't started from a standing stop with our people strategy, because we already had an education strategy agreed in 2019, which is embedded into this strategy. And we've always ongoing done staff surveys with staff to ensure that we are engaging with our staff, and we've done that constantly throughout COVID. So all the feedback that we receive from those staff surveys are embedded in our strategy now moving forward.
Thanks, Sue. So the final
Apologies, Chair, but we can't hear you.
I didn't put my mic on, sorry. I'm going to take these one at a time to enable, and we'll approve them as we go through the list, Carl. So the sustainability strategy, does anybody want to raise any issues under there? Stephen Harris, please.
So it was actually just to make it a more general comment, if I may, Chair. You mentioned about the scrutiny process, which we've gone through at SDC. So I just thought, again, it might be worth a minute or two just sharing with the committee the process we've gone through, which is summarised in section 210. So I'm not going to repeat that, but I think it's worth teasing out a few of the scrutiny and assurance issues we discussed. I mean, there were very long discussions at Strategic Development Committee, which was last week. Yep. Obviously, that will all be in the next set of minutes and will come here in the highlight report as well. But I've sort of come up with 3 or 4 different areas or aspects of scrutiny and assurance that we touched on, which the board, just make the board aware of. So one of them, Stu has mentioned already, is around engagement. Who has been, or with whom will be engaged in this process internally and externally? How joined up are all of these strategies? Do they sit in isolation, and to what extent do they interact and interoperate with each other? There was then how do they support the here and now and the links into the integrated medium-term plan, the IMTP, our plan for the next few years? And again, how do those 2 things work together and support each other? There was then the issue of affordability and funding sources. Again, that's been touched on. We had, again, a long discussion at the committee. Matt contributed to that. Thank you, Matt. And then finally, there was a conversation about getting the balance right between having targets which we aspire to without them being actually impossible to achieve. So with all the best will in the world, we all aspire to do the absolute best we can, and that's what we should be aiming for. But at the same point, there's no benefit in setting targets which we know we can't achieve, because then it ends up as a failure rather than a lack of success, if you see what I mean. So those are the 5 main areas, Chair. And again, IMs may want to add themselves, Gareth and Hilary, but obviously, no, it's not Gareth and Hilary, it's Gareth and Andrew on the committee. So they may want to add a little bit on the conversations as well. But I just thought I'd summarise that, Chair.
I think that's really helpful, and it provides assurance, to the public that we're not just going to be nodding these through. They've already been through a process of scrutiny, and now here's a second chance finally at board. That's very helpful, Steve. I've got Hilary and Gareth, and then Andrew, I think you want to come in. So Hilary, you first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for these, and I appreciate that they've gone through a lot of scrutiny to arrive where we are to date. But just a question in general, this is a long-term strategy, and there's a lot of we will achieve this by doing this, but is there going to be an action plan sitting behind all of this to say when we reach certain points in time with them?
And how, presumably as well, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Hilary. Really important point. Yes is the straight answer. I think what we've tried to describe in there is our ambition and sense of direction. The point you make of the we wills, there's a range of other things which aren't in this document, which are also integral, but you can't put everything in there. So the next stage is, as you described, really, is to translate our ambition then into affordable and realistic actions. I think that work has already started, but I think, you know, we didn't want to go too far because we still need to get approval from the board. This is the direction of travel that the board wishes the organisation to go in. So subject to today's approval, we will be then translating these into plans. And also then the next bit really is also featuring that in our IMTP, because even within all these things, you'll recognise that one of the things we will have to do is achieve a sense of priority and order, because they're all of themselves important, but ultimately we've got a finite resource, we've got finite people. So that's the other bit of work that we will get on with there once and if this is approved today.
So Steve, you wanted to just come in on that point?
I'm just going to emphasise the last point that Carmen, I think, Hilary, that's the process we'll go through. We'll prioritise and then it'll feature in our MTP as we update for the next 3 years. So you'll see that, or you'll be part of the conversation as well that goes with it.
Thanks, Hilary. If that's okay, I'll move to Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. And just to echo Stephen and Carl's comments, there was a thorough review of these strategies at Strategic Development Committee. And to that end, what would be helpful is if we could see, please, tracked copies showing the changes between the versions that have come to the board and the versions that came to the Strategic Development Committee. And I'm not suggesting that that should hold up our approval today, but nevertheless it would be a good exercise in order to track whether the amendments we'd sought have been picked up. And then a point of detail, if I may, please, on the recommendation itself. I note that current future case studies will be included in the final versions, so that I think any approval of these strategies should be subject to the future current case studies. And again, it would be helpful if the final versions could be circulated to board members once those have been finalised. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. I don't know if you want to respond to that. Were the case studies pertinent to each of these enabling strategies? Or was it just for one of them?
Well, just by way of context, I think it's always easy, isn't it? There's a bunch of words, but you need to describe what the difference would be from a bunch of words, I think, just to be part of. So we did include in the digital one our current state and a future state, a couple of case studies, and the committee found that really helpful, as most people would. So we will develop at least one for each of the strategies. And in answer to Gareth's question, yes, we can do both those things. We can provide the documents with the changes that would be helpful for Gareth, and also we're working on the case studies as we speak, so we can provide those to colleagues as well. Not a problem at all.
Thank you. I'm just looking around for approval, but Gareth's point, I will come back to you, Andrew, that we will make any approval we make today subject to sight of the case studies. That's what Gareth asked us for.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to delegate that to Chief Exec, or I mean, I think they're fairly important but relatively straightforward things to do. So I'm in your hands, Richard.
I think Chief Exec and myself, and we'll circulate them as well. But we'd like to see them written up.
Happy with that, Chair. I think as long as the rest of the board are happy.
Andrew, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think I was the person who brought up these case studies. I was really taken by the examples that were in the digital strategy. I wasn't in any way suggesting that every strategy needs multiple, but where it just brings the strategy to life. You know, you could imagine, for example, in people strategy, how, you know, in the future, someone employed by the trust, what that might look like in terms of their professional development. And so, but I don't, you know, I didn't want to bring a lot of additional work. It's just to bring these strategies to life a little bit. So where appropriate, I think, yeah, so an example that aligns to each of the strategies would seem reasonable, but we don't need to go overboard with it. It's just, I felt it was a helpful addition.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. That's really helpful input as well. So can I move now, please? There's no other comments. To the people strategy, please. Are there any comments or observations in relation to the people strategy? Can't see any hands up. Are there any? I'm moving on now then to the digital strategy. Any points to be raised in relation to the digital strategy, please? Can't see any hands up. Estate strategy. I've just got one query that I had. Hilary, Hilary, you first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a really ambitious strategy to achieve. Just one point of clarity, maybe. In your narrative, Carl, when you presented it, you mentioned carbon neutral, which is, I think, far more achievable than eradicate carbon. And in scene 3, in the second point, you do mention eradicate carbon from the estate, and I just question whether that is achievable.
That's a really good question, isn't it? So I think it is achievable, but I also take your point that I think this has to be realistic and achievable. So if the board is happy, I would suggest we amend that and then perhaps come back around that in maybe 3, 4, 5 years' time. I know it seems like a while off, but I think a whole load of technology and other advances will be made by that point. And I think we'd probably be better placed then to step up. So Hilary, I think your point's well made, and I think your point should feature in the end product if the board is happy to do so.
You okay with that answer, Hilary? Thank you. It is, as Hilary said, an ambitious strategy, and I'm mindful that the important thing is that we have an estate which is conducive to working in, which is safe, and those have got to be the absolute guiding principles. But I am also mindful that we're moving, the cancer centre will be moving to new premises within the lifetime of this enabling strategy. And to what extent is future-proof for that move, Carl? Particularly where we've got to apportion lots of spend.
I mean, I think we are at the moment relatively fortunate. We've got literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really maximise the benefits for our staff, patients, donors, everybody else across Wales, because we've only got a small estate, so that's the first thing to say, isn't it? So we start at a relative advantage, depending on how you see things. The big items of our estate will be the new cancer centre, radiotherapy satellite centre, and the refurbishment of the building we're sat in today. So of itself, we will have, if all those things come to pass, a fit for purpose infrastructure for the next 20 to 40 years, which probably sets aside for most other public service organisations in the UK. So I think we should be ambitious. I think we should really push hard, because we've got an opportunity others haven't yet got. So I think, Chair, we will be able to deliver those things in those buildings. That I think that the other area of focus we shouldn't lose sight of, I guess, particularly thinking of the blood service, we've got a whole range of other estates, which is some leased, some shared, some hired, and also our other organisations, so shared service, everything else. So I think that's probably where the biggest focus of our ambition then needs to be. So starting to describe, for example, what do we require as a minimum standard of a state for the blood service, blood collection. So if you start to think then about the wider opportunity, if we're going to go to a local YMCA or a local rugby club, we need to say, well, what are the minimum standards that a donor should expect? Is that heat, Wi-Fi, all those sorts of things? and then go a step further and say, well, if it is Wi-Fi, could this organization partner other organizations to provide that Wi-Fi for free? So then you start to bring in the local young children who can use it, employment opportunities. So I think in answer to your question, it is ambitious, it is intended to be. I think we will deliver first-class patient, donor and staff experience in our new facilities. We will significantly achieve our carbon reduction targets just by that way. But I think we need to go a bit further, a bit wider, and then start to bring in some of the other opportunities about employment, around education training, around supporting and improving resilient communities. So there's just, the opportunity is massive for us at the moment in terms of the investment that we're going to get in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's where we should sort of set our sights. And I know that's what the board wants also.
Yes, yes, we do. But I think where I was coming from is that does this, I accept your point absolutely about Welsh Blood Service, about it's the various bases that it has across Wales, etc. Carl. But we will be moving out of the existing cancer centre in 2 to 3 years time, 3 years time. And so there would come a point where, given that the absolute principle of safety and an environment conducive to work in applies, but spending vast amounts of money, and so are we taking that into consideration?
Yeah, sorry, let me pick up. I do apologise if I sort of missed the question.
Yeah, I probably didn't put it.
No. So I've talked about the future. You know, I mean, we've got a responsibility to provide safe, high quality care with great experience every day, because some people don't use that service on the day. So I think that's the starting point. Yeah. Once we get certainty and sign off of the other infrastructure, clearly there will be a point at which, from an economic perspective, the return on the investment doesn't justify the investment of itself. Okay. But what we absolutely must do, and Jazz and the exec and others will obviously support, is we must provide all the standards on that day for that individual, and that's got to be our ambition. But there will be a point where we don't spend money on capital, for example, where we know we're moving in 6 months because it doesn't justify the public purse. So I think we've started that process already. We understand the key transition points. We understand some of the big ticket items in both our capital program in terms of our kit, our equipment. So we have that intelligence here, we have a plan. And I think what we will then need to do is take that through the various committees, Quality Safety Committee, the board, where there are some things where there's a decision to be made. But I think, you know, we always start from the basis that you only get that care on that given day, so it should be high quality.
Thanks, Carl. That's exactly the answer I was looking, the response I was looking for. Jazz?
I mean, I think this is a leadership challenge for all of us. And I think that there is, I mean, from a clinical perspective, the need for us to, you know, really understand what this means in terms of how we function day to day, and actually what our responsibilities are, you know, for kind of as being a member of society as well as being a leader in the organization. And that's the kind of shift, that's the kind of conversation that we need to start to have to support the strategy. Otherwise, it can't be us in this room thinking it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge given what's happening at the moment. You know, so I guess for us, it's understanding how we will do this in an environment where people are quite sort of stressed with the current workloads, but still needing to have this as a focus, because we know that the future depends on it, and it's how we do this as a collective. You know, we need to sort of work that through, I guess.
And with our patients and donors
and
as
our
well.
Patients, absolutely, and the expectation of us in a way, and because we have opportunities which are unique to us, which are very exciting, I think it almost raises the bar.
Yeah.
One point, just to give the board assurance. So if you just look at our current estate, most of it is at category B. So we've invested in that estate over the last number of years, and we're making sure that that is an ambition. All of our estate, irrespective of quite when we leave it or not, is at a category standard. So I think that's an important sort of, I think, you know, that's where we need to keep it as a minimum until we transition into whatever the future holds. So I think that's where we're planning to do. That's what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, and that's what we will do until we move to anything better. So just to give the public assurance that that is our commitment.
Thank you, Carl. So I can't see any other hands up. So I'm going to move that the board approves the sustainability strategy. Everybody approve the sustainability strategy? Thank you. We approve the people strategy. Thank you. We approve the digital strategy, the enabling strategies, sorry, and we approve the estates enabling strategy, and that we note that current and future case studies will be included in final versions. So thank you, everybody. That was a very important and very large chunk of work. And Carl, if you can thank the individual teams that have also put a lot of work into bringing these enabling strategies to this point. And then kind of very much aligned with what we've just been discussing, we come now to 6.20, which is the patient engagement strategy, which Non Gwilym, our Assistant Director of Communications, is going to lead on. But again, I want to just note that this strategy has been to the Strategic Development Committee and had a fair amount of scrutiny prior to it being brought here today for approval. So I can't see Non's name.
I am here, Chair.
All right, hi Non.
Bore
So
da.
I'm handing over to you now.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Alison, if you can show the slides, please. Diolch Cadeirydd, mae'n bleser gen I fod yma yn rhan o'r tîm I gyflwyno'r strategaeth yma I chi gyd bore yma. It's a real pleasure to be part of the squad who's here today to present the new Cancer Services Patient Engagement Strategy to you. We have
So
Sarah.
Before you start, can I just ask, are all the individuals,
yes,
Anne-Marie, Sarah, Hilary, David, they know where they're going to? Shall I leave that to you to chair, Non?
We've choreographed it, Chair. We know exactly what we need to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll take you through the slides. Yeah, thank you. So we have Sarah Evans here from Compass, formerly the Co-op Centre. We have Hilary as our leader, as our independent member who helped develop this work. David Cogan is here also on behalf of the patient and care liaison group who have been fundamental to this piece of work, and also Marie, who has coordinated all of us, which has been an incredibly difficult task, but we have got here. Thank you very much for putting us on the agenda today. Velindre has a really proud history of delivering cancer services and a really proud relationship, is really proud of the relationship between its staff across the South East Wales region and also its patients and staff also at the health boards. We are proud of that past, as I've mentioned, but we want to do even better. We want to improve the trusted, meaningful relationship we currently have with patients as we look to a transformative future. We embarked on an exercise then to help us deliver a new direction of travel for our patient engagement. We embarked on this exercise last year, and we've included as many people as we can in the process, which includes patients, staff, and a lot of our stakeholders. And Sarah in particular will take you through some of that work later on. I want to say that the patient liaison group have been absolutely crucial to this piece of work. As our patient representatives at the moment, they have been thought-provoking in the contributions they have made to the development of this strategy, but they've also been incredibly supportive to the work and really have a fantastic appetite for how the role they will play in the future and how they want to change that contribution also. I am going to ask some of my colleagues now to just talk through some of the slides. So if we can move on to now the third slide, Sarah Evans from Compass will take us through some of the methodology, so how we actually approached this key piece of work and some of the stakeholders that have contributed to its development. Sarah.
Oh, diolch yn fawr, Non. Thank you very much, Non. Really good to speak to you this morning and to be able to tell you about all of the work that's gone into putting this new patient engagement strategy together. So first of all, we really started looking at what had other people been doing. You know, what was going on out there? How were other hospitals, other cancer centres engaging with their patients? So we had a really sort of in-depth sort of research review, desk-based across most of the UK. We really came up with some good ideas from different centres and started to look at those, but we also looked at the real terminology that people were using in terms of patient engagement, patient experience, patient involvement. And, you know, we started from that to form a basis of what we'd really like to see. And then, you know, that was very much the first stage of our work, of looking what other people were doing. And then it was really going out. Part two was really going out and engaging with as many different stakeholders as we possibly could. And, you know, as Non said, really thanks to Marie here, who really helped us sort of bring such a lot of different people together. We spoke to as many patients, past patients, current patients as possible, but we also spoke to their families and carers to get their perspective, you know, particularly during lockdown, where people hadn't been able to come to the hospital to access, you know, clinical staff as maybe they would have done. We really spoke to David and the team with the patient liaison group. I think we went to a number of different meetings, we met people separately, but we really tried to garner their views and experience as well of, you know, of being past patients and how they wanted to be part of this moving forward. We also spoke to lots of different clinical staff and nursing staff. We did this online, we tried to fit in with break times, but we also came into the centre as well and sort of had a day of drop-in activity, so we could try to get to people that maybe were hard to reach because of their working schedule. We spoke to wider staff. You know, a lot of staff are behind the scenes and maybe don't have that much engagement with patients at the moment, but they really wanted to. So I think they wanted to make sure that their voice was heard in whatever we were coming up with in the end. Executive team have been involved all of the way through this, as have the team at NVCC. We also spoke to a number of volunteers. You know, they used to come to the hospital so often, and it was a really important part of their lives, but they were also really important in the way they interacted and the stories that they came up with about how they've been speaking to patients and families, and that kind of, I guess, support they can offer because they've been there with that lived experience as well. I can see Stephen's on the call. You know, we also involve community health councils, charities, and Diverse Cymru and Health and Care Research Wales. And they very much formed part of a steering group that probably met about 4 times during the I guess, evolution of the patient engagement. And I'm going to hand over to Hilary now, who's going to tell you a little bit more, I think, about that steering group. If we could maybe move to the next slide, Alison, please. Thank you. Oh, sorry, go through some of these key themes that we found first. Do you want to, over to you, Hilary?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, well, as Sarah has already mentioned and shown you, that there was an awful lot of engagement that took place to reach the end point to develop this strategy. And I was really proud to chair that steering group that was set up. And I wanted to thank everybody who contributed to that process and to help us get to this point. And the first thing the steering group did was to look at all the information we'd gathered from all the stakeholders we'd engaged with and then group them into these themes. And information came up a lot. Patients wanted more information, but at the right time. They wanted a place to go to so that they could ask questions. They wanted a more organised approach so that there are key points for engagement, so like pre-visits and first visits. And more importantly, they wanted a touch point at the end of the treatment. A lot of the patients felt that they fell off the cliff when they got to the end of their treatment, and that period seemed to be harder for most than when they were being supported through the treatment. In terms of communication, patients wanted to choose the best options for them, and they'd like to be asked at the outset. Many told us they wanted to receive appointments by texts, as they do with their hairdressers and so on at the minute. And if there were any changes, then they were able to follow it better. So that they did want to have a big push on digital communication, but they also wanted to ensure that there was training and how-to guides to help people through this process and to make sure that the traditional means were also available to people if that was their patient's choice. Staying with communication, many patients and staff told us that sometimes patients concerned are escalated to complaints, but all patients wanted often was just someone to speak to about an issue they have and have it resolved there and then. And I think a lot of these things have already been put in place to help that process develop. And finally, patients wanted to be involved and take part. There was a huge appetite to get involved in any research and innovation projects and a desire to be made aware of these opportunities. And it wasn't just research patients wanted to play more of an active part in. And I think that David from the patient liaison group will develop that and tell you a little bit more about that. So I'll now hand over to David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think from the patient liaison group's point of view, this has come at a very sort of timely point on two aspects, really. On the back of 2 years of what we've all experienced with COVID, and also the fact that Velindre has had a PLG group for a number of years, but you know, the reality where we sit at the moment is we're a very small band of people, only probably about 5 or 6 people. And through this piece of work, as Hilary described, the sort of voice for more involvement came out loud and clear. So I think when we look at it from the patient liaison point of view, we're really at a crossroads as to in which direction we go and how we can fulfill the expectations of both patients, families, and carers for the future. So I think if you look at it from the patient liaison group's point of view, I think where we want to go is we want to be able to emulate the brand that Velindre has from a fundraising point of view. So I think if you look at it from a patient, carer and family point of view, we've got a huge population of people that we can really engage and mobilize, but we need to look internally at our structure to ensure that we can represent those voices and also ensure that we utilize the skills that's available for everybody. So I say certainly from the PLG point of view, we find this very timely, we find it very exciting, but there is a reality that we need to operate and work very differently. And the key point for us at the moment is just about getting more members through this strategy to support us. So that's the feedback from the PLG. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. I think we've probably covered in the themes all of the issues that the goals, our new patient engagement strategy goals encompass. They are here presented to you in a patient-friendly version that we will be publicising very, very soon. I'm going to speak to some of them to just give you a feel for how we got to the conclusions that we did. And I will be repeating some of what's already been said. So David referred to the need for more voices. So we do, on a case-by-case basis, include and call out for patients to help us with all kinds of activities, anything and everything from PLG to media relations and patient stories, for example, podcasts, fundraising, research, all kinds of different activities. But we want to be more systematic in how we allow people access to those opportunities and to get more people involved. Our patients, more than ever, I think, feel that they are part of the team. And so it's incumbent on us to make sure that we organise ourselves as efficiently as possible so that more people, more patients, more carers, more family members can get involved. How they wish to do so is a matter for the second slide. Because I think one of the other key outtakes for me is that people want to get involved in different ways. So David is a member of the PLG. That forum isn't something everybody would want to get involved with, perhaps. Some of our patients want to help with some key information, some background information, some supportive information for future patients. Others want to get involved in fundraising. And of course, we have volunteers, and a lot of our focus group members talked about wanting to get involved in perhaps less formal, less corporate activity, and just helping support our staff in service delivery as volunteers potentially. Another one that we've already alluded to is around patient information. Patients receive information in different ways. It is incumbent on us to make sure that our use of old technology and new technology suits their needs. We start with what the patients tell us suits them as a means of communication, and we organize ourselves around that. And also, as David and Hilary have mentioned, we know patients are aware of a huge amount of improvements and transformation that we're working on at the moment, and they want to help support that. So again, it is important that we organise ourselves in a way that allows for patients to have their say on future cancer services, by focus group, by survey, by any means that suits them. That also includes research, clinical trials. So there's a huge amount of alignment with the work that the research team is doing at the moment as well, and a real appetite to make sure that those opportunities are open to our patients. Underpinning all of that is ensuring that by coordinating this activity in future, we continue to deliver our statutory obligations, specifically around patient experience and monitoring and evaluation patient experience as effectively as possible. Alison, I think we can move on to the next slide now, because now that we have a strategy, the only job of work now is to make sure that we implement it as successfully as possible. We're already starting work in that context too. We have a strategy, we have the patient-friendly version as well in development, and we're working on a communications plan to support and publicise this piece of work. But there is recognition everywhere that to deliver this really ambitious work programme successfully, we are going to have to resource it. So we want to establish a patient engagement hub at the Cancer Centre to support this activity. It will help coordinate, it will help publicise opportunities to get involved in patient engagement in future. In doing so, we are now looking at systems to help support the recruitment process. And by that, I mean how we enable as many of our patient cohort and family and carers to get involved and stay in touch with us as we progress this strategy. So Hilary alluded to the dropping off the cliff comment that we heard several times actually from different patients. We need to develop ways of remaining in touch with our patients so that we continue that relationship in a different way. And David also alluded to the refresh of the patient liaison group. There is real appetite within that group, acknowledging that there could and will be different ways of patients engaging with Velindre Cancer Services in the future. And refreshing what we do in terms of the PLG is part of that process also. And we are being led, and we will be led by David and the group and our patients in that context. That's where we are currently. I am more than happy, as is Sarah, David and Hilary, as they are, I'm sure, to answer any questions you may have. But thank you very much for your support to this point.
Right, sorry. Thanks, Non, and thank you to Sarah, Hilary, and David for their contribution. It was really good, Hilary, to have you on the group, so that it's been having kind of an independent member lens on this whole process throughout. So that's been excellent. I'm now going to open it up for any questions or observations. Mindful that the task at the end of this item is to approve the strategy. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. An observation and terrific work. Thank you to everyone involved. It is a trust-wide communication strategy, but a lot of what Non and others were talking about was related to the Cancer Centre specifically. So I also want to think about WBS and how things are coordinated across the trust. I wonder whether perhaps Alan might need to comment.
So
I think this was for the Cancer Centre, wasn't it?
It was for the Cancer Centre, as I understand. It's very specific.
Okay, thank you. I read it as a trust communication strategy. My apologies if I missed the pitch.
Just to give some update at a Welsh Blood Service level, we are in development and are working up a donor engagement and communication strategy, and that will be raised and brought through the board for support and approval going forward.
Thanks, Alan. So is that okay? I'm sorry if that wasn't made clear, Andrew, but it was a good question. But I'm sorry, but it shouldn't be made clear. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations, again, flowing from a much more detailed discussion at the Strategic Development Committee. First of all, it was to welcome the fact that former patients, previous patients, are actively involved in this, as the phrase has already been used. Feedback I've had from former patients over many years is falling off a cliff and being not forgotten, but sort of a little bit adrift in the system. So very pleasing for all of us, I know, to hear that former patients will be involved in this particular process. So that just a thank you for that. It's just one reflection from myself on this, which we only really briefly touched on the Strategic Development Committee, is the cover paper describes it as a patient engagement strategy. The strategy is entitled Patient, Family and Carer Engagement Strategy, and it was David who again emphasised that this is about patients, families and carers. And I'm now starting to wonder, are we using patient engagement as a convenient shorthand, or is this only a patient engagement strategy, or is it actually a patient, family and carer engagement strategy? I think it is the latter.
Yeah.
But if it is the latter, I think it's important we avoid calling it a patient engagement strategy as a shorthand. So I'm hoping when we come to it, we're going to be approving a patient, family and carer strategy, engagement strategy, not just the patient engagement strategy, which is the shorthand title I think we've used interchangeably across all of the documentation.
That's a very important point. I'll ask Non to come in a second, but Carl's got his hand up. Is it in relation to that point? All right, okay. Non, do you want to answer that then first, please?
It's exactly as you've described, Stephen. So we have been using patient engagement as shorthand for that, but we can look at how we apply that to ensure that that is clear everywhere, always. If I can also just speak very quickly to the previous point about this is a Velindre Cancer Services patient engagement strategy, that we absolutely recognise the need to align the principles here and some of the goals and the learning and the experience with what Alan and the team have been developing, but also to inform what we may want to do in terms of, for example, a children and young people strategy in future and a wider public engagement strategy linked to the work that Stephen and the CHC do in terms of public involvement, consultation, engagement as well. So aligning those pieces of work is our next task when and as we are implementing this piece of work. So it's the first significant piece of work from a cancer services point of view, I think, that will eventually lead to a suite of strategies that help us understand how we engage with all of our publics.
Thanks, Non. Stephen Allen, please.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Non, for that information. I think what I would say is that it's nice to see that it's quite a detailed strategy being put forward by the trust, and predominantly it is for the cancer centre. We appreciate. It would be nice to see that was sort of replicated to include blood service, so it covers everybody who comes into contact with the trust. Would be really helpful. And again, picking up the information, I think is really pleased to see that you've got people who want to become involved. It's really hard these days to get people involved in most things. But actually, it's nice to see you've got people coming forward who wish to be part of your groups, etc., to provide that support. I think the only question I would ask really is how you're going to interact with the wider community insofar as within the current role the CHC has to play within its statutory duties to engage with the community and the public, to be the community representative and voice for patients and carers and families. But it's also within your citizen voice body whose statutory remit will also be to be the citizen's voice for Wales across health and social care. And it'd be interesting to know how you're going to work with those, with the current model we have, to the new model we're going to be having going forward from April next year, of how you're going to dovetail what you're doing so that becomes one voice instead of having a possibility of one group saying one thing and one group saying another thing, which is always a challenge. there's always different voices, but it's how you then come to that conclusion is going to be really difficult, I think, going forward. If it's so, your strategy will need to align to what the Welsh government have said within Healthier Wales, and within the whole of that strategy, to ensure you have one voice for Wales, and that will be a challenge for, I think, for both organisations when that's in place, because that you may come from different jocular positions. But I'm really pleased to see what you put together. I'm really pleased to see all that information, and I do wish it all every success to actually be implemented fully. I think Stephen Harries is right with making sure, and Non, you just confirmed, is for patients, families and carers. But again, you also need to be aware as well is that there's always a risk, isn't there, that the patients who are involved and families and carers who are involved, this is not a derogatory statement, but they can be seen then as specialists or professional patient voices, and you need to have that turnover and that constant sort of evolving of getting different voices in around that table to do with certain aspects of the work you're doing. So it'd be interesting to know how you're going to achieve that going forward as well.
Thank you, Stephen. I think, Steve, you wanted to come in on one of the points that Stephen Allen's raised.
Yes, none might want to come in on the first part about the community engagement bit, Stephen, but I think the second bit, as the Citizens' Voice organisation gets established, we're all going to have to work through that one. And in some ways, we do need to dovetail, and we work really closely with you yourselves at the moment in terms of how those messages get aligned. There will be times when we don't have agreement, possibly, and we also need to work out how we deal with those between the new body and ourselves. I think we understand our working relationships at the moment with the current arrangements, but none of us are quite sure yet how that will play out with the new Citizens' Voice organisation when it's established. So I think we're going to have to play that by ear in many ways. But clearly, the most fundamental part is we need to have good working relationships. Mm-hmm. I think we just need to build those as we're clear about who's in that body, how it wants to work, and manage that through the transition.
Chair, but if I can come back on that one point, if that's okay, I think it's making sure that including with the CHCs currently and also with the CVB when that comes in, is making sure that whatever you're doing with your engagement strategy and whatever the CVB or CHC is doing, it complements each other. Because what you don't want to do is something which is something which is not complementary within getting that patient voice heard, because ultimately it's the board has to make decisions on what they want to do based on some of that information which is provided by patients and carers and also service users.
I just missed I think we've understood what you said. You've got a bit, the signal got a bit weak just at the end of that last sentence, Stephen, but I think that's very helpful. Non, did you want to respond to Stephen, or should we? Jazz wanted to come in, I think. Oh, Carl and Jazz. Shall I take them and then you can answer them all together, Non?
Why not? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Carl, you're next then, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so it's a really great piece of work, and I've seen it a few times now, so apologies for the late observation. Just on the infographic, goal 7, patient promise. Excel in our statutory obligations. I'm not quite sure what we're trying to get across there, because in my mind, you can either meet them or fail them, statutory obligations. I think we're trying to, is it put patients first, or is it exceed our obligations? There's something just in there which I'm not quite sure that really gets across what we're trying to achieve in the patient promise bits. It's just an observation, albeit late, so I do apologise. And the second one then, just picking up on Stephen's point, I love the infographic, it's excellent. But it goes back to Stephen's earlier question. If it's patients, carers and families, this infographic probably just needs to reflect that, because at the minute this is a patient infographic, isn't it? So but my broader point was, or most important point was the patient promise. I think I'm not quite sure those words really get across what we're trying to do there.
Okay, Jazz.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, just to say, you know, how much we welcome this strategy. And I think the reason it's so important is because we are in this challenging time. And there is something around patient expectation, I suppose, not just of patients, but their carers as well. and you know, what we communicate in terms of what they can expect and what we can deliver, which is really, really important. And this conversation we're having nationally, aren't we, around addressing some of the challenges in the system. The phrase that was mentioned twice just now was this concept of falling off a cliff. And I just wanted us to be reminded of the fact that, you know, when I started training and working in the cancer center, we used to follow patients up for 10 years. And that was a very different service that we were able to provide, because we were able to engage with our patients who might have been adjuvant, so might have been potentially cured of their cancers, but would continue to be seen once a year with surgeons and ourselves in a joint clinic to be reassured that their mammogram was fine if it was a breast cancer, or their PSA was fine if it was a prostate cancer. We have radically changed that pathway to discharge patients as soon as your adjuvant therapies are completed. At the earliest point, we constantly look at how we can discharge somebody earlier. Why do we do that? We do that because we have not got the capacity, and we have to do only what we can do. And I think in the context of that, what does that mean for our patients? And it can feel that we cut things quite short. We sort of envelop people with a blanket and then it stops. So for me, we need to be really clear about what expectation, I guess, we create around that. And also the relationship with, in a sense, Stephen was talking about the community, but also, I suppose, third sector. I was thinking of Macmillan, 10 of us, how we work in partnership to help with this process ongoing. I guess it's just struck me that that's something we also should be exploring in the implementation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. And I guess our health board colleagues as well, because they're health board patients, and they're receiving treatment in the health board sometimes as well as with ourselves. Do you want to take those two sets of observations first? Non, I've got Hilary and David afterwards, but do you want to respond to Carl and Jazz? Non?
Yeah, and to Stephen as well, I think. So I agree, Stephen, and the detailed strategy talks about the importance of alignment between the new Citizen Voice body and all, in fact, statutory developments to make sure that we are aligned. So this is not a static piece of work. It will obviously be an evolving piece of work. And in that context, we have also been looking at frameworks aligned and similar to those at other health boards that provide a framework for that public engagement on consultation and wider engagement on service change, for example, also, and that's an evolving piece. So I will definitely keep you informed of where we are with that. In terms of getting the numbers in, we are looking at systems to help support exactly that. So I think what we need is to systemize some of this where we can, so that we have a means of maintaining that engagement and relationship with our patients. So we're looking at systems. In fact, we have systems now in place to help make that happen, so that we can then think creatively about opportunities for us as staff, but also for patients to start to kind of think about how they may want to keep in touch with each other potentially, but also any suggestions they have for us in future. To speak to your point, Carl, about excelling in statutory duties, I think if I can give an example, so I know Nick leads on the patient experience survey, for example, and I think Nick and I would be in agreement that there's more we can do, for example, to make sure that we communicate that as widely as possible to ensure that the numbers are greater. So we will always fulfill our statutory obligations in that respect, but there is always something more we could do to get more patient voices involved in that work. So that may be an example, but I'm more than happy to speak to you again about that, just to make sure that we're not over-promising perhaps in a way that is unachievable. Jazz, your point about falling off the cliff and what that could mean, and again managing expectations around that, I think is really valid. But I think the strategy tries to think differently about different ways other than only through the clinical engagement, ways in which other members of staff can help support our clinicians with some of that, and crucially our patients. So I think that it's it's a really valid point, and a conversation we need to maintain now within cancer services. So they're just some of my brief thoughts on those points. Hilary and David will have more to add, I'm sure.
Thank you. Hilary, please, next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the points that were raised around whether it's a patient care, family engagement strategy or whatever. I think that the infographic around this should have answered it, I felt, and it was called a patient engagement strategy so that the heading of everyone that's involved didn't take over the document. But I think it's certainly meant to be is how we work with the patient's family and carers and potential new patients as well. So, but the patient is at the heart of it. So that's why he came up with the just the brief heading of patient engagement. I just wanted to explain that we did consider it quite a lot, and that's the reason why it came back headed like that.
So I need to know where we go from there, Hilary, because I think the response that we got from Non was that it would be patient family care strategy, whether that goes in, that needs to be in there somewhere. Stephen?
So yeah, I suppose the point I was making, Chair, was the strategy itself is entitled Patient, Family and Care Engagement Strategy. So I think it's very clear on the strategy document. It was more around how we use the term patient engagement, and I absolutely accepting what Hilary says about things need to be manageable as a title.
Yeah, I know, absolutely.
But go in, as when we're talking about these things generally, to make it clear somehow or other that patient engagement is just a shorthand on occasions for a much more or a much wider strategic approach to all those involved with patients in their on their pathway.
Yeah, sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay.
That's what it was the shorthand that I meant.
Okay, thanks, Hilary. David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to bring up the point around the statement of falling off a cliff, because I understand that can leave quite a broad spectrum of thought. So when we've engaged with many patients through this engagement, they split Velindre into two types of support. You've got the functional support, and then you've got the emotional support. And I think where the falling off the cliff comes from is in 2 points, or examples of 2 points, is that when you're a patient and you have 6 weeks worth of treatment that takes place every day, that very soon becomes a very comforting blanket. You go to Velindre every day, you see the medical team. If there's a problem, it's identified straight away. What many patients describe to us is once that 6 weeks period is over and you're left for your body and yourself to recover, the engagement with Velindre, the medical team, gets less. And that takes some adjusting to, because for 6 weeks, you've really wrapped your arms around patients. So I think that's when the falling off the cliff statement comes in. 6 weeks intense treatment, 6 weeks engagement, then you're left alone a little bit. And then secondly, a few patients have described to us that 2 years down the line, and I sit somewhere and I have a cup of tea and I just reflect on what I've been through, then they feel that they're ready to give something back. But they feel that, rightly so, in the right way, they've dropped out the system because they're no longer requiring treatment and they're not seeing the team very often. And what they don't know is a pathway to come back in. And sometimes that population will describe it as falling off the cliff. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context to what the patients are describing to us, for everybody to understand that terminology, Chair. That was all.
David, that is really helpful, I think. And I think, Non, if I can speak for you, the reaching out to those who might want to be involved as a volunteer or in other aspects of patient engagement is, I'm sure, this is something that we would endorse. Non?
Sorry, oh, me, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think David has summarised that as succinctly as I could ever wish to do.
Yeah, I think so. So Are there any other, I haven't got any other hands up. This strategy is brought to us for approval. I don't think there are any conditions upon the approval other than perhaps making it clear throughout the document about the scope of the strategy. So I move that the board approves the patient primary carer engagement strategy. I think I've got nods all round. Excellent piece of work, Non. Congratulations and thanks to you and the team and everybody that's been involved. And we look forward to seeing this develop and to you coming back to us, because as I'm sure you will in the coming weeks and months.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. That's great news.
Thank you, Non. Excellent. Now I'm sure everybody would like a break, but I have to say that I'm only going to give you a break conditional on when you come back. We've got quite a bit of the agenda yet to get through. So I'm afraid I can only allow 5 minutes. And all pow to the second half of this meeting, and we've got just as much, if not more, to get through in the second half of the meeting as we did in the first half. So the first item on our agenda now going forward is section 7, quality, safety and performance. And the first item there is 7.10, which is the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee highlight report, which as Vicky is on leave, and Nicola Williams, our exec nurse for Nursing Allied Health Professions and Health Science, is going to introduce to us. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. So the papers there, we did a very comprehensive 3-hour-long Quality, Safety and Performance Committee on the 12th of May. As you will see from the top of the paper, triangulation is one of the reasons why we combined a number of committees, and workforce emerged through the majority of papers and topics for discussion at the committee as the triangulated theme for that period of time. And as you will see, it's identified there as the emerging risk area for the organisation, and that is clearly in line with what's happening nationally, not only nationally in Wales, but UK and internationally as well. So the committee had detailed discussion throughout its deliberations in respect of the plans that are being taken forward to address that, and the impact of that, both currently and predicted, on our performance, particularly around SAC radiotherapy and the blood supply chain. There is significant work being done, and the people strategy that we discussed earlier is one of the elements there. But fundamentally, it's about workforce redesign, top of licence working, and skill reconfiguration, as well as recruitment and retention strategies and well-being. The triangulation there, affecting performance, as I've said, financial impacts of that, well-being of staff, and again aligned to the launch of the new well-being space, to try and support our staff, and the redesign pressures linked to the service developments and across the organisation. Sickness also increasing, but again, robust management plans in place there. The Gold Command reports into the committee, and Steve mentioned earlier the de-escalation letter in relation to social distancing that we received towards the end of last week. And just to provide the board with assurance in respect of that, that has been considered by the COVID cell, and there is a document that the executive team will consider to approve the implementation plans by the end of this week, so we can put those in line and in place by Monday. That will create, if approved, some increased capacity across the organisation. But again, the strategy that's been employed by the COVID cell is a risk-based approach, ensuring that we de-escalate safely, as well as in line with national standards. The other highlight is the COVID outbreak that took place on first floor ward in the cancer service at a time of high community transmission. On a positive in respect of that, very well contained, quickly managed, no harm in relation to patients, and no breaches identified through the daily audits around infection control practices. Performance was a key area of discussion throughout the committee, particularly in respect to the blood supply chain, SACT and radiotherapy, and assurance and scrutiny of the plans in place to address those performance, as well as the falls issue. And on a positive note, the significant improvement in complaints response times, as I highlighted in the PTR Q4 report, was also commended by the committee. And I'll stop there if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Nicola. Are there any, Alan, please?
It's just a point for the record, if I may, Chair. I only just picked it up, but it refers to outsourcing in alert and escalation as 10% of trust capacity being outsourced. I don't believe Welsh Blood Service, for the record, is outsourcing any work. So I believe that is specific to the cancer centre. So it might just need that record amendment.
Thank you, Alan.
So we can note that in the minutes, Alan. Thank you. Are there any other, Stephen, please?
Yeah, it was just to pick up on one of the points Nicola mentioned in passing, which was discussed in quite a bit of detail at the committee, within the alert escalate section in terms of the workforce aspects. We can see there's a half a dozen bullet points there. One we particularly explored was around well-being of staff. And as we all understand, the staff have been through a very difficult, almost traumatic period of a couple of years, and as part of the triangulation, it's very important we all know and understand that we care for them and their well-being. So that was something the committee particularly focused in on, and something we received assurance on as part of the overall package of staff and support for staff generally. And I think you mentioned earlier, Donna, in your chair's report about the well-being centre, just been one example. So we did receive a lot of assurance around what we are doing to care for our staff and their well-being, which I thought was important just to mention and emphasise here.
Yeah, I'm sure you're welcome that observation from Stephen, Nicola.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any hands up, Board Secretary? No. Okay, so we received that report, Nicola. Thank you very much. And it is becoming obvious in terms of when you notice it more in the highlight report, just how much things are being triangulated now, which was the purpose of the reorganisation of the committee structure anyway. So that's becoming really obvious. And so thanks. Now we come to 7.20, which is delivering excellence performance report for the period ending March 2022. This is going to be led by Rachel and Alan. We've got the cover paper. I'm just going to speak to that, and then we've got the individual divisions and sections. How are you going to handle that, please, Andrew and Rachel? Alan, sorry, and Rachel.
I'm happy going first and updating on Welsh Blood Service and trying to set the two together, if that's helpful, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm happy taking forward the cover paper for Welsh Blood Service alongside the performance report of that.
Okay, and then we'll come to you, Rachel. Thank you, and then you, Sue.
Okay,
right,
so
Alan first.
So the report is specific to March information. As was indicated earlier, this went through some rigorous discussion in the Quality Safety Performance Committee. I'd like to highlight 2 or 3 key areas of strain within the service, I think it's fair to say. The first one relates to blood supply chain, and in March we actually entered something called Blue Alert, where we were starting to feel some strain on our O group positive stock. I can report as of today we are still under Blue Alert, and that is a period of over 10 weeks for supply chain that the service is experiencing some strain in service. A combination of reasons at the time of this report, particular issues with COVID sickness, absences and vacancies within the service. We also went through a sprint of bank holidays where we've been unable to recover, and we've still got a couple on board. And obviously demand within the service is starting to pick up as well. So a combination of issues that service is working through. I'm glad to report there are some green shoots. I think we've performed extremely well during this period, although we have had to seek some mutual aid to support supply chain.
Oh, that's a test, everybody. We don't have to evacuate the room. Right, thank you, Alan.
Okay, so supply chain is the first thing in terms of strain, as I said earlier. Bone marrow volunteers, we saw a quite good performance for March, but we recognise that we need to gear up as we transition from COVID arrangements into our university programme. So we're actively engaging with those, and we have some active operational campaigns to improve those figures going forward within the service, which again were discussed in some detail in the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee. And a particular strain area at the moment is also our reference serology lab, a fairly specialised lab that provides patient cross-matching results in a number of areas. That department is under some strain, not least because activity is increased, and we have some staffing difficulties in that area and in fairly specialist niche areas, the laboratory areas. Again, we're working through that, and we have a short, medium and long-term plan in terms of the recovery of the position. In terms of quality markers for the service in March, extremely healthy and strong performance, I feel. You'll see a report there about incident closure. Some of those relate to CLIP incidents, which are no longer going to be related and reported incidents going forward because they're quality deviations. Very strong satisfaction levels from donors still being reported, low numbers of complaints and all being delivered within timetable and in terms of local resolution. I'd like to draw reference to also, just in summary of the report while I draw breath, a kind letter that Steve Allen provided the service in mid-May, which basically thanked and recognised the service for all its efforts during what has been an extremely challenging time for the service over the COVID period. That was on the back of a presentation that myself and colleague went into just to discuss some of the changes and the challenges for the service. And that was really gratefully received in terms of a vote of thanks from the community, and that has been issued to all staff and communicated within our service and very well received. The report is there for information in terms of performance markers for the service and areas of wastage, again performing well in these times. We're obviously now transitioning out of COVID and hope to be able to step up and gear up our operation accordingly through the June period. And I have some high levels of confidence that we'll start to see some improvements in those areas. And I'll probably draw breath there. Happy to take any questions that might come up.
Thank you. Are there any queries for Alan? Can't see. Thanks, Alan. It's obviously been, it still remains quite a difficult time. But it seems to me from what the report is telling us, the cover paper and the appendices, that everything is being mitigated. So which is very reassuring to us as a board.
Thank you, Chair.
I can't see any hands up, so I'm going to hand over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I just want to start by saying the context has changed probably in which we're operating in Velindre now. We have seen a downturn in this month following the last few months being above 90%, although not achieving some of those targets. But what we are starting to see is we've had referrals at least up to pre-COVID levels. And we've had referrals up to pre-COVID levels and are now starting to see them exceed pre-COVID referrals into the trust. And we're seeing the knock-on impact from the work that has been paused by health boards now coming back online from December. So it's a forecasted increase. And we do expect that increase to continue through to year end as well.
Yeah.
Alongside that, we are continuing to have staff sickness, a number still related to COVID. And the difficulty being that we're still working with the constraints of IPC measures. So whilst our referrals and demand has come in at basic level, we still actually don't have that full capacity available. Hopefully now some of that will change as we're moving through our risk assessments and reducing some of that back to our pre-COVID capacity, which will be really, really helpful. just noting in radiotherapy, when we're looking at, both for radiotherapy emergency and SACT emergency, those numbers that have dropped, but the significant impact due to the fact they're very small numbers going through. So in SACT emergency services, we've seen one patient, which is therefore dropping us down to 83%. Going forward, we have in radiotherapy, we've appointed a patient pathway lead who's doing some detailed work looking at where our process variations are to try and address some of the concerns that we've got going through, and we're continuing to work with outsourcing some of our breast and prostate patients. Moving forward to the SACT, we've had some helpful conversations recently with partner organisations, and we're moving to increase chair capacity within Prince Charles Hospital, which will help with patients from the north of the Gwent Valley while we wait for the Neville Hall service to come back online. And as I said, we are looking at reducing the physical distancing to bring some additional chairs, and we've been working with Nicola and her team to restructure the workforce model to help facilitate some of this going forward. The outpatient figures, that's been paused because it's a manual collection data, so it's been paused for the last few months. One of the reasons for the difficulty in achieving some of that going forward is around the accuracy of the marker. So recording 30 minutes before scheduled appointment, many patients choose to come before the 30 minutes. So what we're doing is some work to look at how we can provide a better patient experience quality indicator going forward, and that'll tie in with the work of the patient experience manager who we talked about earlier through Non.
So in relation to that particular point, Rachel, one of the issues which was exercising Stephen and I a lot was how long people were waiting, and when they were waiting, if there was frailty, were they being assessed for their frailty and managed in accordance with their needs. Those were some of the key issues, Stephen, that we were worried about in relation to outpatients.
Okay. What I don't know is the answer to that. I think one of the concerns is the way my understanding is it's recorded is when somebody turns up into the department. Now they may choose to come earlier, which is why they may wait longer, as opposed to us being the cause for them waiting longer. And that's one of the challenges around the marker. What I can't tell you, and I'll have to go back and look, is around the frailty as a concern. That's the first I'm aware of that.
Right, I think I was looking because somebody else was putting their hand up then, so
sorry.
I got a bit distracted toward the end of that.
What I said is with regards to the frailty and the condition of the patients, any potential impact, I'm not aware that there are any issues, but I'll go back and have that conversation to see how we're managing that. Yeah,
because I think that is important.
Yeah.
That not everybody's in the same physical condition when they arrive, and if they are very frail, then it's waiting a long time. Well, they may still have to wait, but they need different looking after.
Yeah, I think some of the concern is they're choosing to wait as well. We just need to capture that in there as well.
I think some people will come early because they know they can get a parking space
Yeah.
there, don't they? So Jazz and then Stephen Allen.
Just to respond on that particular point, I suppose I can't answer the question about what the process is which we need to look at in terms of how we assess patients as soon as they walk through the door in terms of the frailty issue. But I think what I can provide assurance on is that, if somebody is picked up as being unwell, that's immediately fast-tracked into the clinic. So somebody will come in and say, there's a patient that isn't well, or if there's an assessment that flags a concern, that is always immediately escalated, and obviously there's clinical staff around. The other aspect is we often know our patients who are frail, so that there's also we anticipate patients' arrivals. There's always people checking, and so the environment is perhaps the issue is not as stark as it may seem. But absolutely, we can go away and do a piece of work to put more sort of safeguards around that.
So Nick, did you want to come in on that point?
Just
Yeah,
wanted
you're
to
on.
add to that point. Following the 15-step challenge that we undertook in the Patients Department last year, one of the things they've done is to enhance the healthcare support worker supervision of the waiting area and to offer drinks and to make sure there's a bit of a waiting room rounding undertaking of patients there on a continual basis. And that's been really successful and will help to identify anybody who's struggling or may deteriorate whilst they're there as well.
Oh, that's really, thanks, that's excellent feedback for that. I'm very pleased to hear that. So I've got Stephen Allen and then Gareth. Stephen Allen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to pick up on a couple of things, if that's okay. One on the reporting of the, which I appreciate you put it on the outpatients within 30 minutes. I appreciate you put that down to capacity, and I think I heard you right saying correctly that it's done manually, so that's why it's probably taking some time. Do you have a plan when you're going to reintroduce that sort of measure, so that would give some assurance to people who are arriving that they can be seen within their appointment time? And can I just pick up as well on the radiotherapy and SACT? For a couple of meetings now, we've seen you've been struggling with those, and I think the trust has been quite open within its activity and what it's trying to do. From a public point of view, it'd be really helpful to see what, a public plan of how you're going to address those issues that you're currently struggling with, radiotherapy and SACT, because I don't think I've seen that within a public paper that actually explains what you're doing to actually address those shortcomings that you're currently under.
Stephen, the answer is a lot. So I'm going to put our Chief Executive in the hot seat to respond to you directly.
Thank you, Chair. I did volunteer for this, by the way. I think, so we have got an annual plan, Stephen, and we're responding on the ground at the moment. What we'll do is, and what Rachel's working on, is a monthly plan. So we're absolutely clear on what's milestone and the capacity we've got in place. So we'll bring that back to the board through Quality and Safety Committee over the next 2 months, because over the next period. So you'll see that, and which will hopefully we can make it clear, given the expectation of demand, which we have to make some assumptions about. We don't know definitively what's going to come. We will establish what we can and can't do during that period and absolutely be clear, both as a board and to the public and yourselves, where we are, almost on a quarterly basis, I suspect, and maybe monthly.
Can I come back on that, Chair? That's okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a follow-up, really. So do you believe that with the paper that's going to management exec about the COVID restrictions easing, do you think that will assist you within radiotherapy and SACT going forward?
Well, I think as Rachel was explaining, we're in the throes now of the acute recovery stage from COVID, where as the health boards are coming back on stream, the number of referrals coming down to us is increasing, and we're more than we were pre-COVID levels in terms of the volume of patients that are coming through, and yet we're still working within certain COVID restrictions, including LINAC capacity and the staffing issues. So in a sense, we mirror what's happening out in health board land, if you like. So
just to add to that, Stephen, I mean, it's bound to help in some ways. It won't be the solution. It's not the panacea because of the demand and the pent-up demand that's going to come through. There will need to be other solutions in place as well. So it is part of the thinking, and as Nick said earlier, we're working that through as how that might play out. We still have to risk assess where we are. COVID hasn't gone away, so we still need to be clear about how we're going to react as an organisation. So in summary, it's not a panacea for everything, but it will help.
Thank you. And the first point, Chair, and the first point I made about the collection of the outpatients.
About the what? Sometimes your signal gets a bit garbled. Can you repeat that?
Yes,
Stephen,
of course I will. Obviously, I was just saying about the outpatients sort of work you do, which is managing patients within 30 minutes of their appointment. You stopped that in March due to capacity issues. So do you know when that you're going to reinstigate that process again?
Rachel? Yeah, you're on.
It's something we're working on at the moment because it requires the process that's required and the individuals that need to be involved. What we need to do is make sure we've got that correct, that doesn't prevent the flow of patients going through to clinics. So hopefully we're looking at that as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Gareth, I think, Gareth, your hand was up.
Thank you, Chair. My question was in relation to the data collection in outpatients as well. There's an inconsistency between the cover paper, which says we've paused that between December and February, and the actual appendix says December and March. So like Stephen Allen, I'd be quite keen to know when we're going to reintroduce that, because it's pointless having a measure if we're not collecting data to see whether we're meeting the measure or not.
Thank you. Do you want to reply to that, Rachel?
The answer is it's December and March. We haven't reintroduced it as yet. We are looking at it, as I said. The other thing we will be doing is looking at the measures as part of the review of the performance management framework and the key performance indicators to determine what we've got. Are they the correct measures that give you assurance that we're doing what we need to do within the service?
So 30 minutes would be far too long for some patients, and it's quite acceptable for others. It's, you know, it's a blunt instrument just to have a flat 30 minutes, isn't it?
It is, and I think the challenge is how much what are we looking at it to record and to give assurance upon? If it's about patient experience, it's probably not the right measure. Agreeing with what you just said, the other issue is there's an element of patient choice in here as well. So we don't have hard fast rule. You can only turn up 30 minutes before. Patients may choose to come in a bit earlier, and we know that's what does happen in some point. So it's understanding what we want to capture and then looking at how best we can do that to provide assurance to the board that we are giving the best service for our patients.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Stephen Allen, your hand is still up.
Yes, no, it was just to come back on that one point actually, because I think I'm a bit concerned with what I just heard then, to be honest with you, and it's not to put you on the spot. It's just that obviously looking at the performance data you've got from April 21 to November 21, whereupon you didn't meet the target at all, and now you're looking to refine that target. So you're now saying the target may not be what you're actually looking to count, and it could be perceived by the public actually, well, we're not meeting the target, so we're going to get rid of it, or we're going to do it in a different way. I do think we need some transparency on the process you're following for this to ensure that it gives the public some assurance. And I would also agree that 30 minutes sort of as 30 minutes as a blanket isn't really helpful, because some patients will happy to wait longer, some can't wait longer for obvious reasons. But I think it's how you demonstrate that with sort of within the performance framework.
It was the same thing happened with the Welsh Ambulance Service, didn't it? When they changed their how they categorised weights, people thought, well, you can't deliver on performance, so let's recategorise the targets, and that was unfair criticism, really. So, but that's a good point for us to note for the public. Right, I got lots of hands up now. I got Stephen Harries, Andrew, Carl, and Steve Ham. So where do we go? Who's first? I don't know who's. I can't tell who's first.
Just respond.
Okay, respond to that.
And that's what you said. Just to reassure you, Stephen, we will be transparent. Any change in our targets, we will be transparent. We won't just go from one to the other without explanation. Just to give you assurance on that.
So Lauren has now listed things in order, so that's brilliant. So Andrew, you're next.
Thanks. So this question about future demand, and really I'm wondering, given, you know, we hear a lot about misdiagnosis during the lockdown period, there's going to be a surge in demand, and there was quite a big uptick in the number of patients scheduled for chemotherapy treatment. I noticed March of this year. Does it feel like we're at the beginning of that surge, which would be rather worrying? Are there people doing modeling on future numbers that might be coming, because of course misdiagnosis during the lockdown period is, you know, thinking about the timing of these things, they will start to come through as people come through for demanding radio and chemotherapy. So where are we on terms of that future modelling, or either done here or other parts of the UK, so we can really try to see what's ahead?
So Rachel will respond, and I think Jazz wants to come in. So Rachel, you first.
So there's a lot of work that is ongoing around looking at the future planning by specialty within Wales. That's helped us, and we've had to do it as part of the performance, as part of the IMTP going forward, and to help shape our recovery. So that's the information we'll be using, coming back to what Steve was saying, to look at what's coming through and what we need to do to actually help address that. We do anticipate a continued increase in demand in all our areas. And I suppose the other thing to say is, anecdotally, from clinicians who've been involved in regional MDT meetings, what we are seeing is patients with increased complexity and presenting later. And of course, that's having a big impact on us. We have also started in the process of reinstigating regular meetings with individual health boards to try and understand that future pathway in the short, medium term, and because potentially how they're working in terms of additional clinics, additional surgeons, will have a knock-on effect to the referrals coming through to us as well.
I think, Andrew, it's not so much misdiagnosis as late diagnosis, because people didn't.
I think that's a more accurate.
For assessment.
You're absolutely right. At which they're now presenting, they tend to be later and more complex.
They're seeing less coming through from the normal screening route, is the feeling.
Jazz wanted to come in.
In the modelling, so about 18 months ago, Andrew, we set out our organisation, the delivery unit with the Welsh Cancer Network and other health boards, to do exactly that. So we've got quite a sophisticated model now, which essentially picks up primary care, the referral. We've also picked up proxy indicated in A&E, because that's another, and then we picked the supply chain, the single cancer pathway. So what we're able to do now is to work through from those indicators at what point we think the referral will hit the cancer centre. So it's a pretty good model. As with any model, the key limitation is the data that goes into it. So there's still some gaps in the data, and particularly around some information from health boards, but also, for example, diagnostics. We know there are a bunch of diagnostic treatments yet to pop into the system, which clearly then impact on us. But the model is pretty good. It's one of the better ones about, and other organisations are using that. But there are still some limiting factors which we're working through with colleagues nationally.
So Jazz, you wanted to just respond to some of these comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, I mean, I think Rachel has articulated things very well. We are trying to, predict, work with our health board colleagues, use the models that we have. But I suppose what I wanted to say was, these are sort of unprecedented times for us. And there is uncertainty in the system. And partly that is because we're still sort of, realizing the sort of demand and the scale of that. So when we look at planned care across the nation, 750,000 people waiting for appointments in the system, a proportion of those will be cancer patients. And in response to that, we're looking at regional working. So we've got Cwmtaf and Cardiff and Vale joining forces, fantastic to see, to run a program to manage, 12 and 16 weeks wait for a breast lump to be addressed. The consequence of that is that Velindre will receive, we're trying to work out the details over the next 3 months, an additional 35 patients potentially that we wouldn't have been expecting at that time. They would have presented themselves. But I just want to sort of reflect the complexity of what's happening in response to the whole planned care agenda, which will mean that there will be these sort of stops and starts in the way patients will flow through to us. And our very best ability to prepare for this
you know, is going to be challenged. We still have the same workforce to manage this flow, and so all these conversations are absolutely key. Working also with the network to understand what it means, but you know, I think that these issues are not going to go away quickly, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
You're absolutely right, Jazz. I think hopefully the public can understand with us that Velindre is part of the pandemic, you know, part of what's happened in the pandemic, not just the health boards. And we are working through the consequences of what's happened in the health boards. Is coming to us a bit later on down the line, because we're the tertiary centre. So we need to have a narrative that helps us to explain that to our public, because otherwise they're going to, you know, well, they'll ask, rightly so, they'll ask questions, but we need to have the explanation.
I suppose the other thing, just to provide some assurance on that, there is national work happening across the health boards, which we've been part of this week, looking at that exact issue, how we engage with the population, and let them know the position of NHS Wales in response to recovery from COVID.
That's really helpful. Thanks, thanks, Rachel, for that. So now, Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I wanted to come back to outpatients, which is a topic which I think a board can't pass without me mentioning at some point. I just want to come back to the point you've been making, Don, about this is a matter you and I and others have been raising for some considerable time, and we all understand how the past 2 years has perhaps diverted attention to dealing with the crises that unfolded. But we are now coming back out of that. We need to return to the topic about patients, particularly because it's such a high volume activity within the trust. It affects so many different people. I just wanted to pick up on just one comment first, Rachel, when you mentioned about people or patients choosing to arrive early. Absolutely understand that, but obviously the 30 minutes only starts counting from their appointment time. So someone arrives 15 minutes before their appointment, nobody's suggesting that the 30 minutes starts then. We all understand the 30 minutes starts from the point the appointment time is scheduled. So they can come an hour before if they wish, but it's the 30 minutes from the appointment time. I think you mentioned about patients arriving early and how you can't manage that. That can't be managed and may or may not have an impact on it. I think we all understand as well that 30 minutes in some ways is an arbitrary thing which has been set, and whether that's the right figure or not will depend on the patient and the circumstance, and please, we'll be looking at that. The thing I've picked up on over perhaps several years of trying to get a non-expert insight into this, in fact, for many patients, I believe there's actually two waits when they arrive, certainly into outpatients. There's a wait to have bloods, and then there's a period when the blood results come back, and then there's a wait to be seen by the clinical team. In the past, we've raised the question of whether, in fact, we should be actually reflecting the fact that perhaps it's impossible for patients to be seen within 30 minutes if they have a 20-minute wait for bloods. I don't know what the wait time is. Sometimes I'm sure it's very quick. Busy clinics, I'm sure it's a bit longer. So if we're going to refine this, perhaps we could try and tease out almost two targets, one for how long do you wait for bloods, and then after that, once the results are back, how long you wait for your clinic appointment. But for me, it's not just the whole issue of recording, because of course, if we could see all patients quickly, we wouldn't have been worrying about were they seen within 30 minutes or not. So the flip side of this, which I just want to come back to, which we have raised on previous occasions, is around the booking rules for clinics and whether we've got the booking rules right, because certainly some of the information that was passed to me some considerable time ago seemed to suggest that for some clinics at least, we're knowingly front-loading clinics with patients. So we're bringing quite a few in at the start of the clinic, perhaps knowing they can't be seen within 30 minutes, but to ensure there are patients there to be seen. I'm not saying that is the case. That's the impression I was given quite a while back. And that's another piece of work that perhaps has been paused. So I think whatever work we're doing, we need as part of that to be looking at the booking rules and making sure they also help drive a very efficient system, but also one which is a good experience for patients and the carers that come with them. Thank you.
I think that's really helpful, and there's some work that is being started to look at and scoping around some of that pathway work within the medical directorate and the medical teams across the board. So how could we improve the flow through, and where are the opportunities to improve things like waiting time, so the patient gets a better experience. So definitely it's part of.
So I think what we're saying is we would like outpatients to remain on the performance report. Look forward to the work as it develops, Rachel, but we would continue to want to see whatever data and performance is available in relation to outpatients in the performance report going forward. Carl, did you want to come back in? That's okay. So so then finally it's the workforce aspect, Sue.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The report that's in the bundle here is a specific workforce report that looks at key performance indicators from a workforce perspective in line with sickness, PADR and statutory mandatory training. I mean, there has been quite a bit of conversation today already from colleagues around workforce and workforce challenges. And what we're doing moving forward is trying to triangulate the data much more effectively in order to present a report that's much more aligned, as opposed to just a one standalone report that just provides one-dimensional data. So we are working on that. But nevertheless, just to pick up some key points on this specific report, as I say, it does highlight sickness data. The data that is presented is from February, but more up-to-date data on sickness is currently standing 6.3% across the trust. PADR rates are remained around 69%, and statutory mandatory training remains at 85%. Just a few points on that data. Despite everything, you know, PADRs are still ongoing. You know, as we have many service challenges, managers are still prioritising PADRs and development. And whilst we're not meeting our target of 85%, it still remains one of the highest percentage rates across NHS Wales for PADRs. So I think there's some element of congratulation we can have in that. And again, statutory mandatory training is in line with compliance, so we are meeting our target rates there. So again, I think that shows our commitment to our statutory mandatory training compliance rates. We've mentioned sickness a number of times this morning. Clearly, we are challenged by absence rates with regards to sickness. COVID still remains an issue. There's a handful of people off specifically with COVID, but it's the implications of COVID and people having to isolate, particularly in small specialised areas, that does impact on service delivery. But our biggest reason for sickness has always remained stress and anxiety, and that is an area that we're really focusing on very much across the trust. Some interventions have already been mentioned around the development of wellbeing areas. We've mentioned that already this morning, but we've also now appointed a staff psychologist into the trust as well to support our health and wellbeing plan as well. The report highlights lots of data and interventions that we're making in specific hotspot areas. I don't intend to go into that, but what I want to provide assurances in where we are looking. We workforce links in closely with service managers to triangulate the data that we have from a workforce perspective, to look at hotspot areas and to ensure the interventions in those hotspots are linked to the problem around sickness absence. So lots of work going on around wellbeing to support our staff. It's always been a priority, will continue to be so. You've heard this morning, the people strategy wellbeing is firmly centre stage in that as well, and will remain so as well. And the priority areas moving forward for workforce, as I said, are wellbeing, but also looking at the right supply and shape of the workforce, because that is changing because of the services we need to deliver, but also promoting Velindre as an employer of choice. So attracting and retaining the right staff is a key priority for us moving forward, in line with the people strategy we've already presented this morning. So, as I say, lots of detail in the report, working on ensuring that aligned much more, so the presentationally it will improve as we move forward. But I'm happy to take any specific questions.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any queries or observations for Sue? I think we've given workforce quite an air in other parts of the agenda actually today. So we've got anything? No. So if there aren't any queries for Sue, that concludes the performance report, and we've noted and discussed its content and the appendices that were contained as well. So we now come to 7.3 on the agenda, which is the financial report for the period ending March 2022, a significant time of year for us, Matt, and I'm handing over to you for the finance report, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As you said, it's a report for the period ended March 22, so it's a backward look. Our accounts are being audited as we speak, and that audit is due to come to its conclusion fairly soon. Just highlights on table 2.1, the key financial targets, which were all met. I just want to assure you, in terms of the public sector payment performance, it is showing as slightly under target. But to remind you, this is for the core trust. So overall, including shared services, we did meet that target. And the report does highlight some of the difficulties that we've touched on already throughout numerous conversations around the sickness levels in the trust and how that does have a detrimental impact, particularly around receipting of goods and services, which then knocks onto this target. So we have struggled to meet that target, but all the targets have been met. As you can see, a small underspend of 28,000 and capital delivered within our capital funding limit. So the report is there for noting, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just looking around to see if there are any queries for Matt. Are you anticipating any problems with the year-end report?
In terms of the audit, there's no
sorry.
major issues that have been flagged. Obviously, the one that you'll be aware of around the medical staff pensions issue has already been highlighted. In terms of it's an all Wales issue in terms of accounts being qualified.
Will they actually qualify the accounts, or will it be a note in the accounts?
It'll be qualification.
Be qualified, but everybody in Wales will be in the same position.
Yeah, everyone who's made that payment in terms of clinicians that have had their tax issues dealt with through the statutory scheme that was set out by UK government.
Thanks, Matt. Gareth, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, just on the final page of the cover paper, in the row which says financial implications impact, I suppose it should say the trust reported a financial position of £28,000 underspend. Yeah.
Correct. Apologies. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Spotting that.
Thank you.
So you'll include that, Matt? Yeah. Okay. If there aren't any other observations or queries, thanks, Matt. The next item, 7.40, is also over to you, as Martin isn't available to be with us today. If you could introduce the Audit Committee highlight report, please.
So, yeah, thanks, Chair. Because Martin hasn't had an opportunity to fully review the report, I'm going to give you an update, and I presume the actual paper will follow because it's not in the pack.
Yeah, so when Martin's there to approve it, he's back from holiday.
Okay, so I'm just going to highlight the key issues which you need to be aware of in terms of the alert escalate section. The main area of focus that section talks about is to do with the audit action tracker. So it's in relation to all of our internal and external audit reports and the recommendations and the actions that we've set as executives in terms of how we're going to respond to those recommendations. So the audit committee noted that were 41 overdue recommendations identified as red, and some with sort of dates that were imminently going to be passed, where the individuals who were responsible hadn't asked for extensions, and others where they had asked for extensions. So basically the audit committee were not very content with this. They expressed a number of concerns about it not being a satisfactory position. So audit committee basically made it clear that their expectation was that each of these audit reports needs to have executive ownership, and there is. That needs to be identified in terms of the tracker, and where, I suppose, on a monthly basis, we're reviewing the action plans. I guess execs need to have oversight of those, ensuring all of their teams are focusing on the actions and providing assurance back to the audit committee in terms of timescales that they think are realistic and when they can be delivered in terms of those actions. One thing just to flag then that came from that is also the follow-up review that internal audit did around the action tracker. So there's a piece of work that I'm going to progress with the executives around having a sort of desktop procedure and a process to make sure there's enhanced focus around your action tracker, and linking in probably with Lauren in terms of our risk management process.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the audit action tracker is part of that risk management.
Yeah.
It's essentially dealing with the risks that internal and external audit have highlighted. And we're trying to mitigate and take actions to reduce that risk. So the thing that the committee did do, though, therefore, is agree any extensions to deadlines that were asked for, but also where they hadn't asked for them, give a general extension to June. But there is an expectation of improvement in terms of a reduction in obviously the number of outstanding actions that are read. And I'll leave it at that. There's obviously other stuff in the other sections of the highlight report, but I'm not going to go through those.
That's the main
thing that you need to be aware of as board.
Yeah. So Steve, presumably you will talk to your exec director team to ensure that there's compliance.
Yeah. One touch point on this, and we'll know more.
So thank you for that. So I'd like an update on that issue. I'm sure it might come in the next highlight report, but if not, I think we do need to have an update on that.
And I can obviously arrange it at our touch points one-to-ones, but obviously we can keep IMs updated on the progress we're making in terms of that sort of process mapping and how we're going to take it forward in terms of improvement.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so now we come to 7.50, which is the risk register. And this is over to Lauren. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. So this report shares the March extract of risk registers in Datex and summarises the feedback over the last period since the board met in March, and also goes through the key final steps in implementing the risk framework before the end of June. So page 2, key points for the for the board. So the risks that are at level 20 and 16 are contained within the report. There are no level 25 risks, and led by Rachel, there's been an extensive review over the last few weeks of the Velindre Cancer Services risk profile, and with the SLT in Velindre Cancer Centre, the ongoing review of those risks in the regular senior leadership team meetings is clear and going to be consistent in that respect going forwards. Based on that, Executive Management Board we receive the risk register each month, and we always consider the question of taking a step back. Do we think that the risk register reflects the overall profile of the organisation? With the work that has been done in the cancer services risks, that question and review is going to be even more clear for us to do in this reporting period. And we've got an executive management board on Monday where we will be considering the risk profile again.
Sorry.
And then the remaining parts of the risk framework are on track to implement by the end of June. So, the report then goes into the changes in the 20 and 16 level risks, and these have been considered also in Quality, Safety and Performance Committee, as Nicola mentioned, as part of the triangulation of key data in that committee. And then in section 3 describes the development of the risk framework. So the 3 remaining steps are the policy and corporate management level procedure being finalised, 3 levels of staff training. So for board awareness, the board level of that training is part of the June Development Day, June 28th Development Day. And then the transition of WBS risks onto Datex 14. So the oversight of the development of the risk framework continues to be via the audit committee, and that was considered in the May committee. So that's what I was going to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to open that now for observation, discussion, questions to Lauren. Gareth, please.
Chair, a couple of comments, if I may. The first is on page 5 in the penultimate paragraph and the final sentence, and it refers to the overall project should be reflected as one of the highest risks for the organisation. The current profile has not been included in this report as to not distort the overall picture until an agreed articulation is confirmed. And I suppose if it's one of the highest risks to the organisation, why is it not included in the report, and irrespective of whether it impacts on the profile? That's my first question. And the second one then relates to the table that's on page 8. So, and I appreciate this may be a function of timing, but a number of the review dates have passed there, and there's one, in fact, which is in December 2021, financial sustainability, which is at the top of page 9, and the comment appears to be that the risk review is overdue, but that just seems a bit worrying that it's overdue for that length of time.
Thank you, Gareth. So the digital health and care record risks, as it says in that paragraph, the way in which the project team had articulated the risk profile, which has been in the last couple of reports, was resulting in 3 risks at level 20 and 7 at 16. So Executive Management Board and the project team agree that that is not appropriate in terms of the complete dominance of the trust risk profile that including those risks brought during in the previous reporting period. So the appropriate articulation of risks for that project at the right level is being worked through by the project. So it's only this one report that's an exception that hasn't got, it's just a, you know, that isn't appropriate, but the actual new risks going through that final articulation and internal governance is happening at the moment. So you'll see that in the next report. And the review dates, so as I say, this is an extract from Datex as at the end of March. And that 2198 is overdue. So as you say, that's what the comment reflects. I didn't really want to.
2198 is financial
stability and
sustainability.
Yeah. So Rachel Maston.
Rachel,
I don't know, either Rachel or Matt wants to come 2198.
I'd have to read the detail of that.
So have we got any try to move the screen across. That risk is overdue.
Yeah. So it's Velindre Cancer Centre owned risk that will be going through SLT.
No coordinated system for SLAs and
I don't
contracts.
even know what the risk was.
2198,
yeah,
just
financial sustainability.
It is overdue. It's a very specific one about how do we coordinate that with, it'll go through the system. Let SLT go through these.
Yes, exactly.
And then that'll come back.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Stephen. Steve?
Oh, yeah, he's got his mic off. Oh, I'm so pleased you've done that as well. I feel I'm not on my own now.
I have to speak through yours.
Oh.
Sorry, it's a very specific risk, and
Can you hear Steve now, Gareth?
I can, yes, thank you.
right. So there were too many mics on, Gareth, which was
okay.
This is a very specific one about how we coordinate these things. It is being reviewed at the moment. 3CC, SLT are going through all their risks, and I think we'll pick it up. And by the time of the next one, it will be reviewed. It's not the generality of financial risk for the cancer service. It's particularly one about knowing where our SLAs are.
Yeah, I suppose the point is, Steve, that it is a red risk at 16, and that we're accepting or being asked to accept that it hasn't been reviewed for nearly 6 months, which it is not satisfactory, really.
Yeah, I guess it is 3 months. It's extract data as at the end of March, but yes, the point is the same.
Matt, did you want to just come in on that, please?
Yeah, the reason I was confused because it's not a risk that I've generated, and when I've asked, I mean, for clarification of exactly what is this risk that you're trying to describe, I haven't yet had a chance to follow that up with individuals in the cancer centre and understand it. So hopefully Rachel and myself can get to the bottom of what was being articulated in that risk, so I can actually understand. Well, I know it's SLAs rather than tell me what the risk is.
Yeah.
It's
I suppose my point of view, right?
Sorry, we can't hear again.
We can't hear.
I don't think you're on, Rachel. Now
Right,
you're on.
okay.
Yeah. Now
So
you're on.
sorry, having come in the last month or so, the risk register and how we look at the risk register, manage the risk register is a process of work that we're going through at the moment. And in line with Matt, some of those risks for me is understanding where they've come from, and therefore the level of risk that's aligned to them. Is that still the current position? And if it is, what are we doing about it? So we're working through that.
So that will be reappraised and possibly reworked in time for the next report.
Yes, Chair. The other thing to I suppose add to that is we had a useful meeting between finance and VCC, myself and the coup last week, in terms of looking at how we put some of those financial processes in place as well to address some of these areas where they may need updating.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I can't. Hillary's your hand up?
Yeah, I just, to finish that point off, I suppose it would be useful to have a target date of when that conversation is going to happen and come to a conclusion on the risks and their validity.
Next board meeting?
Next board.
Next board. Rachel, next board?
That's fine. Just
Matt? Yeah, next board meeting,
Yeah.
Hillary. 2 months. Or Hillary, are you frozen?
I'm contemplating whether that's soon enough, bearing in mind that it's been out of date since, not reviewed since December anyway. I think that from an exec perspective, you probably, I would say that it would need to be reviewed in a month's time, even if it's reported to board in 2.
Yeah, so that reported to board in 2 months, but that doesn't mean addressed in 2 months, does it?
No, exactly what the chair said. Hillary, the process will feed through to reporting in July.
So, Stephen, please.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose I just wanted to make one little observation, which is in my highlight report for TCS Scrutiny Committee. I drew out the point about the risk register and issues raised and concerns at that committee about it not being up to date and dates being passed. So I'm simply just observing that, and part of the conversation we just had here at the board was very similar to the conversation we had at the TCS Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen.
Yes, it is this one, and it's acknowledged in the comments that the work was being done, but yes.
2.5.17, which is due now, will be addressed by today. Right, Rachel.
So the one that we do just need to review as well is 2193. Sorry.
2193.
I think that's probably been copied across incorrectly because we do have concerns around medical physics experts.
This is due Monday. There is a risk that lack of medical physics expert cover impacts on the molecular radiotherapy nuclear medicine services.
So we just need to look at that one for you as well.
Yeah. Although we did have a bit of an update on that from Cathy Aiken at our last board development session. But we expect at the next board meeting that these are contemporary at the very least, and that we are aware of the mitigating actions. So so we've noted the risks at level 20 and level 16. We've recorded some actions that we're expecting to take place in the next month and to be reported to this board in July. And we're noting the ongoing developments of the trust risks framework, which is still in its infancy. I think it's fair to say we're getting there. We're getting there. So 7.6, Lauren, is the trust assurance framework. Again, this has been noted at the Strategic Development Committee and the Audit Committee prior to being received by Trust Board today. And so, Lauren, can I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, I will be brief. So the trust assurance framework we're used to discussing at board now, and so to go to the specific points in 3.2, which are the changes over the last period. The two that we had particular discussion on in Executive Management Board, which is explained in the commentary, is around the workforce planning risk, number 3, and number 4, organisational culture. So workforce planning, as we've discussed at the points of the meeting, is having a significant focus in Executive Management Board currently. And the organisational culture risk, we were reflecting on the work in terms of the organisational development and organisational design, which we are starting to discuss with the board and will be doing more so over the next couple of months. So those two in particular are currently undergoing further review on the back of Executive Management Board discussion. And then 3.3 talks around the themes over the last period governance wise. So the March and then May Strategic Development Committees, the March Trust Board and the May Audit Committee. So the 3 points to note there are the links between the Trust Assurance Framework, the Risk Register, performance and quality frameworks. Secondly, building the concept of reverse stress testing into our annual review of the strategic risks. And then thirdly was a point raised at the March, the Trust Board, around how we can think about the review of the strategic risks which underpin the assurance framework in looking at the strategic risks across all organisations and healthcare trends globally and within the UK and Wales to help frame our review. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lauren. Are there any questions or observations for Lauren? I can't see.
Gareth.
Oh, Gareth. Sorry, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. At the top of page 10, of the cover paper, Lauren. We refer to, and it starts on the previous page, about reverse stress testing. And it says that in that paragraph that it is proposed that this happens in parallel with the review of the overall risk profile. So am I right in understanding that you're saying that that is going to be done by September? Just so I get my dates aligned, really, because I think in paragraph 332 you say it'll be done by September 2022. Is that the same for the reverse stress testing work as well?
Yes. So that second paragraph on page 10 is updated since we discussed this in audit committee to reflect your comments, Gareth, on timing, because I had said later in the year. Yeah. Your point was it needs to be ideally sooner than that. So in thinking about, whilst Emma and I have been thinking about, well, actually, how do we do that? But well, it is an important input, in fact, into the annual review. So that will be done by September.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. So, so we've discussed and reviewed the trust assurance framework. We've noted the progress made and the next steps in supporting the continued development and can't say the word, and implementing the trust assurance framework as outlined in section 3.3. It is good to see this starting to come together. So the next item on the agenda is section 7.7, which is the annual equalities report. And again, before I ask Sue to talk to this, to say this has had a thorough review, discussion and scrutiny in quality and performance. And I know that a number of changes have been made to the report since that meeting. So Sue, I'll hand over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to briefly provide an overview, this report provides the quality monitoring data in line with the Equality Act and public sector quality duty, and it relates specifically to our staff. The public sector quality duty requires us to give updates and assurance around actions we take to eliminate any discrimination and to highlight what we're doing with regards to advancing equality of opportunities between people. So the report is very detailed in its data and provides workforce statistics related to protected characteristics as of March 2021, delayed the report because of COVID. The detail in the report does include staff who were then with us from NHS Wales, shared from NHS Wales Informatics Service, I should say, and includes our hosted organisations of NHS shared services as well. We're currently working on a report that looks at data up to March 2022, and we will be ensuring in that report, as well as the data, we will have much more qualitative information in there and triangulated by benchmarking information as well. One point of accuracy I would like to point out in the report is on in the body of the report on page 2. The data comes from our electronic staff record information system, and that system doesn't currently have data fields to allow for collection of data on gender reassignment or gender identity. However, on page 7, I believe it is, and just check 7 and 8 of the report, it does say pay grade by gender and profession by gender and contract type by gender. That should read sex, not gender. So just as a point of accuracy. So apologies for that, we'll get that updated. It was updated in some areas. I didn't quite note all the areas, so apologies for that. So that's the report as it stands. There's a lot of data in there. I'll pause now and ask if there's any questions.
Thanks, Sue. Can I start off with a question, which is there's a lot of data in this report, information and so on, which will inevitably result in some actions that we will need to take. And I apologize if you might have said this in your introduction and might not have heard it. Will there be an action plan now which arises out of this? I mean, just one example, the number of people the proportion of our staff in the 55 age 50 to 55 age back, you know, that's got to be of a concern to us. For an example, you
Yes.
don't have to answer that one in
No, no.
particular,
No.
just to know that there will be an action plan.
Yes, absolutely. There's an action plan embedded underneath this, and we can provide detail about trajectory of improvement on some of those things, and we're triangulating our data with other workforce information data as well, to ensure that that's embedded in action plans moving forward as well.
And that will come through quality and safety.
It will indeed.
Yeah. Thank you. Hilary?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if I missed that you already said this, but it was quite difficult to hear. What would be useful next time is to have a general population comparison as to where we stand against the general population that we serve.
Yes. Okay, that's point noted. Thank you, Hilary. We'll take that.
Right, so that'll be for next year's annual report, Hilary. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I can't see any other hands up. So, Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a similar point on comparisons, really, about the number of leavers. And I appreciate that the figures are skewed because of NWIS and Digital Healthcare Wales. But the net figure, ignoring that element, is about 430, if my maths is correct. And it would be helpful to understand whether that level of, I suppose, churn, you'd call it, is how that compares with other health organisations in Wales as a percentage of total workforce.
Take those points in the comparison and benchmarking data is part of the work that we're taking forward now for the next iteration of the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're asked to approve this report. We've discussed it and reviewed it, and I move that we do approve this report, and we look forward to the additional work coming through quality and safety and a slightly different format for the next annual report.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sue. Have you been outside waiting to see where we are in the agenda? Have you? All right. I thought for a minute it was coincidence that you arrived right on the money.
We've been well managed. She's very kind to us.
So we come now to item 8 on the agenda, which is part of Transforming Cancer Services. A very important agenda item this, the integrated radiotherapy solution outlined full business case, which we'll be asked to approve. And I'd like to welcome Gavin Bryce, Hugh Llewellyn. Did you bring anybody else in with you? Just the two. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hugh. So we very much, this is a very important item for us. We're very pleased to see it come here at this time. And I'll hand over to you to introduce it. Oh, Steve wants to come in.
Can I just say, I mean, given where we are on the agenda, Andrew and if we just give a very brief introduction to give time for any questions. Yeah, if you can, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. Yeah, today is it's a pleasure to be here to present the strategic case for the integrated radiotherapy solution project. 2.5 years of work that was set in motion by the board in October 2019, coming to fruition today for your consideration. So briefly, the paper gives an overview of the 5 cases that we are required to create and present to the board and to Welsh Government to make the case for funding. 5 cases, including strategic case, economic case, financial, commercial and management case. The focus for this session is on the strategic case. And briefly, Gavin, just to bring up highlights and the key features on the strategic case, please.
Yeah, thanks you, Chair. So this is a hybrid business case, so it merges in an OBC and FBC together, which has been a request from Welsh Government. So you've got probably what you'd expect is a slightly larger strategic case than you'd normally expect. The movement from the PBC, which was previously approved, I think, in October 2019 by the board, is that we've done a review of the strategies to make sure we still remain aligned, and certainly in terms of national, regional and local policies and cancer strategies, there is still strong alignment with what we are hoping to achieve through IRS. There's been no changes to scope at any time, so that's really positive. The investment objectives, I'll just very quickly draw out, I think are very strong and haven't changed, and that is that we want the IRS solution to make sure that we've got quality, safe services, that it allows us the sufficient capacity to meet demand moving forward, and that it improves experience for patients, staff and carers, and that also it facilitates education, research and innovation, which is at the heart of the objectives also for the TCS programme. Just briefly to point the board to the areas that have been updated since the PBC. The business needs section is particularly strong, and the age of the linear accelerator fleet has been updated. There's been a significant updating of the attendance figures to include the disruption that COVID has brought through the pandemic. We did have quite a significant increase in radiotherapy activity 18-19, which was up 10%, and then the first year of COVID, a 33% reduction. And last year, up until the end of April, we've had a 10% bounce back, and that includes the service still operating under some COVID restrictions. We do know there's a potential surge, which you may have heard about today, as surgery and the wider health picks up as well. And our previous 2% forecast held well, certainly up until the pandemic, and we've got no reason to think that that will change. We've also updated the benefits and risks for the OBC, FBC, and most importantly, they're quantified now and have senior level owners attributed to them as well. So that's just the update on the strategic case, and I think unless you've got anything to add, I think that's the update for the board. Thank you.
Who shall I open it? Shall I open it up
Please,
at this point?
please, Chair.
Okay. Are there any observations, queries, points of discussion? Stephen, please.
Again, just to assure the board that this has been considered in some considerable detail at the TCS Scrutiny Committee. It's been round it several times, so as chair of that committee, I'm very happy to endorse this for recommendation, but it has been thoroughly scrutinised, as I'm sure my colleagues here will confirm.
Thank you, Stephen. Absolutely. I can't see any other hands up, and the number of us as IMs are present at that committee, yourself as chair, myself, Gareth, Jones and Hilary. So it's an IM scrutiny as well as our other board colleagues.
Just to add, of course, that Hilary brings with her expertise in estates and planning, and Gareth brings his legal expertise. So there's been quite a wide spread of expertise scrutinising this as well.
Absolutely. So I still can't see any hands up. So I'm going to move that we approve the strategic case of the IRS, OBC and FBC. So that's approved by the board. I'm sure you're very pleased, Gavin. We'll talk to you this afternoon as well, but we do not underestimate how much work has gone in to bringing us to this point. And I wanted to congratulate Hugh, you and Gavin and the rest of the team. This has been a very significant undertaking. It's very important to the whole Transforming Cancer Services endeavour that we're involved in, and you've worked so hard throughout, and I would like that put on record, please, to acknowledge all of the effort, skill, expertise, patience, and I might think of a few more adjectives shortly, but it's been most impressive. Thank you. And then we come to 8.2, which is the Radiotherapy Satellite Centre full business case. And Andrea, I didn't see you creeping round the back, so I didn't welcome you, but I've noticed you there now, so welcome, Andrea. So this is your item, please, to introduce. And this is another one where we're going to be asked to approve the strategic case. Andrea.
Chair, sorry.
Can't hear, Chair.
Andrea, you've got your mic on.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I was just explaining that our medical physics and the radiotherapy colleagues have sent their apologies. So most of you will be aware, a bit of background on the radiotherapy satellite. It was initially, we've been working on this for many years, about 10 years, I think we started having our initial discussions. And then as part of the TCS program, it was identified a need for a satellite centre. And as part of that, we did a thorough selection process for the location of that centre. And as a result of that, Aneurin Bevan Neville Hall was identified as the preferred location. And since that time, we've been working in partnership with the Aneurin Bevan Health Board on developing the case. The principles of that partnership is that Aneurin Bevan will be a kind of landlord and Velindre will provide the clinical services. So the OBC for this was approved by this board and Welsh Government in 2020. And I guess the first point is just say it aligns very closely with obviously the IRS business case you've just been talking about and also the new VCC. So I was just going to pick out really a few issues, just look at the strategic case, the key changes since that previous approval to go through. So I think it's fair to say, and we've just heard this with the IRS, the clinical arguments for the satellite remain unchanged. It's a key treatment modality for radiotherapy in cancer with, over 50% of patients receiving it at some stage in their treatment plan and 40% of those that are cured. It will also have the advantage of local access, and we know that that does have an impact on the increase of the uptake of treatments with more local access, and that in turn will lead hopefully to improved clinical outcomes. So the estimate is that over 6,500 patient journeys a year could benefit, but will be less than they are currently. So it's a lot of, from a patient point of view, it's significant.
And other points of view, Andrea, from sustainability,
yes,
drainage, and
yes,
so on.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, lots to do. Yeah. So similar to the IRS, we've reviewed the alignment with national strategies, and we believe it still fits in with that. We reviewed the investment objectives and the activity levels, and I won't repeat because Gavin's already talked about that the clear need is still there, and the 2% TCS assumption has been identified as remaining valid for this. I think it's important probably just to point out that the need for additional capacity for radiotherapy is really key, and it's needed ahead of the new VCC. And again, that's another argument for support of a satellite centre. And without that, we will struggle to provide a radiotherapy service that's safe and effective. The key milestones, we'd be looking, subject to approval, to be starting on the Aneurin Bevan site in the summer, and the centre could be open in July 2024. So really what I'm looking for today, if possible, is support for the strategic case. And I don't know whether, Stephen, as you did with the IRS, I know it went through scrutiny, so I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, just to add, Chair, again, this has been through scrutiny and has been considered several times, several iterations in detail, and certainly as Chair of the committee, I'm happy to recommend it for approval by the board today.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful. Thank you, Andrea.
Oh, Chair, sorry, can I just say one other thing? I don't know whether it's relevant, but Aneurin Bevan, it went to Aneurin Bevan's board yesterday as well.
Oh,
and
they've
approved
today,
it.
so,
I thought it was today, but it was yesterday, and they did approve it. It's just,
they've approved it.
Yes, just
that's
information.
really important information. Thank you, Andrea. So are there any observations or queries?
Just one point. I know it's just that in a funny way, it's actually an Aneurin Bevan's FBC, isn't it? But we're a partner, so it's a quirk of the fact that the building's on their land, but it's our service. It's just a little bit of a quirk, which you'll see feature in the management case about how we then implement. So we'll pick that up later.
But in keeping with ministerial priorities about working together, one NHS and so on, so it ticks all those boxes as well. So, Hilary, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I think Carl made the main point that I wanted to make there, but just for completeness, in the business case, on page 1, there is a section at the top to be said to be inserted. I don't think that that's necessary. Is it an overhang from something else?
Where's that, Hilary, please? In the exec summary.
Yes, so right to the, there's a line highlighted in yellow right at the top of page 1 to be inserted. I don't think there is anything else to be inserted, but it's just for completeness that we're not submitting something that isn't complete, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got the copy in front of me, so I'm just, the executive summary has been completed, Hilary. I don't know whether that's in your pack, so apologies if it isn't. It's literally been written this week, but it is only a summary of the cases within the full business case. So it's a summary of that. There's nothing new or nothing different in that. It's just a couple of pages summary of the whole case.
It's in
I can circulate that if it is in there,
8.2.0A.
Sorry. If it's been missed, then it's.
We're just passing it across for
Sorry,
Andrea to look at,
apologies.
Hilary.
Yeah. Yeah, I do apologise. There is an executive summary that has been written, which I can share with the board, but it is purely a summary of the rest of the business case. So apologies for that.
There's no different information in there.
Nothing different. It
Summary.
is just an easier read than the whole business case, a summary of the different sections. Apologies.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Hilary. Are there any other queries or observations that colleagues wish to make? Because if not, again, I move that we approve the strategic case of the Radiotherapy Satellite Centre FBC. And so that also then is approved. And Andrea, I just want to pass on my thanks to you and everybody that's worked with you. As Carl noted, made quite complicated because it was 2 health boards that had to work together and had to agree so much in order for this to be able to go forward. So thank you for your leadership, Andrea, in getting us to this point. And if that could be noted in the minutes, please. So I haven't been informed that there's any other business. So before I close the meeting, I'd like to ask Andrea, Gavin and Hugh to stay with us, please, for lunch. We're starting a process in which we're inviting some staff to join us at every board meeting during lunchtime, so that we can have informal chat. It's about connecting the organisation with the board. So we're about to have some lunch, and we're very grateful if you would join us. And so I'd like now, in conclusion, and has anybody got any points they want to make about any items on the agenda today? Because if you're sitting there thinking, I wish I'd said X, Y, or Z, now's your chance, and nobody has. So so we're asked to adopt the following resolution: that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest, and that's in accordance with section 1(2) of the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, paragraph 67. So can I thank everybody that's attended this morning? It's been a long morning. It's been a very substantial agenda.